Chapter 942. Bai Lingshi couldn't help but raise her head and look over. She saw Lin Sun's dark eyes were deep, and his brows were full of arrogance and calmness. If it wasn't for the Immortal Palace, Yulinkong was bound to be no match for Lin Sun, so there was nothing to worry about. After that, Bai Lingshi suddenly realized that she always thought Lin Sun was still the same Lin Sun, but she had overlooked one thing. Lin Sun had already forged his own invincible reputation through numerous battles among the younger generation of the West Hung world, and there were almost no one who could compete with him. A few hours later, Bai Lingshi left when she arrived at a city in the Great Qin province. She was going to the profound Inquiry Sword House, and a big shot of the Immortal Palace was already waiting there. Whether it was Bai Lingshi or the other successors of the Immortal Palace who participated in the Tao Discussion Lantern Festival, all of them had to gather there and then set off for their sections. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to cross a world and return to the southern profound world by relying on their own strength. This made Lin Sun suddenly realize that if he wanted to leave the West Hung world and go to the Dongxing world, he had to solve a problem as well. How should he cross a world? Lin Sun had hoped that the Green Hill Fox clan could help him solve this problem, but he gave up this thought because of a conflict. Lin Sun thought for a long time before he decided to immediately solve this problem after he sent Yu Jianming's corpse back to his homeland. 7 days later, Fire Spirit Province, Yin Capital, Lin Sun walked into this bustling city once again. Half a year ago, when he arrived at the ancient Desolation Realm for the first time, this was the first city he entered. When he revisited his homeland, Lin Sun couldn't help but think of Xia Xiaochong, the innocent and confused girl, and he also thought of Xiaohao, a mysterious figure who was dormant in Starfall Peak of Purple Bull Mountain. Xiaohao was from a Nether Star Imperial clan, and he was the young master of this clan. The place where he was dormant was extremely mysterious, and it was protected by the Star Sacred Formation and the Star Egg for him to reside in. At that time, Lin Sun had a strong premonition that when Xiaohao came out from his dormant state, he was bound to cause a storm in the world and shine brilliantly. It was because he was too extraordinary, possessing great boldness, great ambition, and great ambitions. His origins were mysterious, and he had long remained silent for who knew how many years, just waiting for the great era to arrive before making an appearance. At that time, Xiaohao also took the initiative to give Lin a secluded star bug raining method, which was a secret method for raising spirit-eating bugs, which solved Lin's urgent need. Xiaohao, and the mysterious young master who was being protected by an azure-robed old ape in the Sinkhole's 5 Elements Sacred Island, should be the same kind of people. When the great era arrives, they will definitely appear out of nowhere. While Lin was thinking, he unconsciously came to the message tree in the center of the city. This place was still as lively and noisy as before, with many practitioners surrounding it. Speaking of which, this demon god Lin only rose to prominence in our Yindu city. At that time, he had just begun to reveal his extraordinary talent. Who could have imagined that his name would spread throughout the entire Western Hung domain? He's like a king among the younger generation, an unparalleled existence. As the saying goes, people don't recognize the cloud-soaring tree, and only when the cloud-soaring tree is high will the Tao begin. Unfortunately, the path of demon god Lin's rise was too bloody, and he's offended countless ancient orthodoxies. His future will surely be accompanied by numerous dangers and killing tribulations. That's absurd. Isn't it just because demon god Lin came from the mortal world and has no one to rely on? Only those ancient orthodoxies are allowed to bully others, but demon god Lin isn't allowed to fight back? That's too unfair. There's a lot of news on the message tree, and most of them were related to the Tao Discussion Lantern Festival. Moreover, news related to the Tao Discussion Lantern Festival was bound to be related to Lin Sun. It could even be said that along with the end of the Tao Discussion Lantern Festival, the most sensational news in the Western Hung domain recently was related to Lin Sun. As a result, discussions about him naturally became the hottest topic of discussion. Lin Sun had already used the grand formless art to change his appearance and temperament. Otherwise, he would definitely be recognized at the first possible moment. Lin Sun's gaze lingered on the message tree for a long time before he turned around and left. He was very clearly aware that the greater his reputation was, the more danger he was bound to face, and those ancient orthodoxies were bound to not let the matter go. In his opinion, the Western Hung domain had already become a treacherous and dangerous vortex, and it wasn't advisable to stay for long. Moreover, the matter of leaving had to be put on the agenda as soon as possible. Help me contact by phone Liu. Tell him that I want to obtain fortune, and I'll meet him in Flame Capital 3 days from now. It wasn't long before Lin Sun found an expert from the Windspeaker clan, and after he expressed his intentions, Lin Sun gave the expert 100 mid-grade spiritual essence before leaving swiftly. Fire Spirit Province, Thousand Lake City. This was an extremely remote, small city that wasn't large in scale, and it was like a remote village when compared to Flame Capital. The Zheng clan was the most powerful clan in Qianhu City, but the most powerful elder in the clan was only at the Reincarnation Development Realm. One day later, Lin Sun's figure appeared in Thousand Lake City. Yu Jiaming? Of course I know him. He is the pride of Thousand Lake City. Among the younger generation, he is the most dazzling one. I heard that his reputation has already spread throughout the Fire Spirit Province. On the way, Lin Sun found a practitioner to inquire about Yu Jiaming. The latter looked proud, and his tone was full of admiration for Yu Jiaming. This made Lin Sun a little sad. What would he think if he knew that Yu Jiaming had passed away? Immediately, Lin Sun suddenly realized that the news of Yu Jiaming's death seemed to have not spread to this remote town yet. Do you know where the Yu family is? Green Willow Lake. You'll know when you get there. Thanks a lot. After saying goodbye to the practitioner, Lin Sun soon found his destination. It was a quiet and beautiful lake. The water of the lake was clear and jade green, and there were numerous vigorous and emerald green willow trees by the lake. A myriad of willow branches danced in the wind, and they were lush and graceful. The Yu family was located at the lakeside. It was a simple and magnificent mansion. On the way here, Lin Sun had inquired about Yu Jiaming. When Yu Jiaming was 7 years old, his biological mother died of a stubborn disease. His father was so sad that his hair turned white overnight. Only half a year later, he also passed away. Today, there were only Yu Jiaming and his twin brother Yu Jianfei left in the Yu family. Sword Cry was amazing when it didn't cry. Sword Fei soared into the sky when it didn't cry. Just from their names, it could be seen that the two brothers were entrusted with the high hopes of their parents. But to Lin Sun's surprise, Yu Jiaming's talent was extraordinary and extremely suitable for cultivation. When he was 13 years old, he was chosen by a master of Thousand Illusion Taoism sect and was accepted as a disciple. On the contrary, Yu Jianfei was weak and sickly since he was a child, and his mind seemed to be defective. Until now, he had not returned to normal. This matter also became a strange story in Qianhu City. His elder brother was famous in the fire spirit realm, but his younger brother was born with a defect. It was difficult not to pay attention to him. However, since Yu Jiaming joined Thousand Illusion Taoism sect, no one in Qianhu City dared to laugh at his younger brother Yu Jianfei. Squeak! After Lin Sun knocked on the door, the closed door of Yu family was opened. An old servant in plain clothes came out with a puzzled look. Child, who are you looking for? Yu Jianfei. Lin Sun cupped his hands and said. He was surprised to find that the old servant in front of him seemed to have been beaten violently. His face was swollen, and there were many footprints on his clothes. The old servant's face suddenly changed, and he said angrily, You are sent by Zheng family. My second son was taken away by you this morning. What else do you want? Zheng family? Lin Sun was stunned and frowned. Old man, you misunderstood me. I'm Yu Jiaming's friend. I come here for something. Ah. The old servant was stunned and immediately said in surprise, Child, you are really a friend of Jiaming? So, you're also a disciple from Thousand Illusion Taoism sect? That's great. Now the second young master can be saved. If you didn't come, I was going to ask for help from Thousand Illusion Taoism sect myself. As he spoke, he actually had tears in his old eyes, looking as if he was crying tears of joy. Yu Jianfei was taken away. Lin Sun narrowed his black eyes and had a bad feeling in his heart. He asked directly, What on earth is going on? Old man, please tell me in detail. Okay. The old servant wiped away the tears in his eyes and nodded repeatedly. After 10 minutes, Lin Sun finally understood what was going on. It turned out that in the year when Yu Jiaming joined Thousand Illusion Taoism sect, Zheng family, the largest clan in Qianhu City, came to Yu Jianfei and wanted to marry Zheng Yunxiao, the youngest daughter of the patriarch of Zheng family. They also signed a marriage contract and promised that when Zheng Yunxiao was 18 years old, she would officially marry Yu Jianfei. This matter caused a great sensation at that time because everyone knew that Yu Jianfei was a fool. Zheng family obviously wanted to get closer to Yu Jiaming by means of marriage. After all, Yu Jiaming had joined Thousand Illusion Taoism sect at that time, and his future was limitless. If they could become relatives with Yu Jiaming, Zheng family's position in Qianhu City would undoubtedly be more stable. Yu Jiaming naturally knew this, but he finally agreed to this matter because he went a Thousand Illusion Taoism sect to cultivate and was doomed to be unable to take care of his younger brother. In order to prevent his mentally defective younger brother from being bullied, Yu Jiaming made such a decision so that his younger brother could live a carefree life under the protection of Zheng family. This kind of marriage continued until this year. According to the age, Zheng Yunxiao, the youngest daughter of the patriarch of Zheng family, was 18 years old, and it was time for her to get married. But in recent days, Zheng family suddenly reneged and refused to admit that there had been such a thing. They even threatened that it was impossible for their daughter to marry a fool. Now, there was only one old servant left in Yu family who took care of Yu Jianfei's daily life. In the face of such a change, he immediately panicked and didn't know what to do. And Yu Jianfei was a mentally defective person, so he couldn't help at all. Originally, the old servant hoped that Yu Jianming, who was cultivating in Thousand Illusion Taoism sect, could come back to uphold justice. Who would have thought that just this morning, Zheng family suddenly sent a group of people to break into Yu family and take away Yu Jianfei, who was eating. When Lin Sun arrived, the old servant was writing a letter to Yu Jiaming of Thousand Illusion Taoism sect for help. Of course, Lin Sun knew that since this letter could be delivered to Thousand Illusion Taoism sect, Yu Jiaming was doomed to never come back. Knowing all this, Lin Sun's black eyes suddenly flashed a touch of coldness, and a touch of anger surged uncontrollably in his heart. Chapter 943. Plop. After saying the reason, the old servant knelt on the ground and burst into tears. Child, please save my second young master. Lin Sun quickly helped him up and said, Don't worry, old man. Jiaming is my friend. His younger brother is my younger brother. As he spoke, his black eyes flashed with a touch of coldness. On the way to Qianhu City, Lin Sun had learned that the Zheng clan was the largest clan in Qianhu City. It was like a mountain oppressing Qianhu City, and no one could shake it. But in Lin Sun's view, the Zheng clan was not a threat at all. The strongest person in the Zheng clan was only at the reincarnation developing realm. For the residents of the city, he might be a great figure. Unfortunately, in Lin Sun's eyes, he was no different from a chicken or a dog. This was not arrogance, but a kind of disdainful demeanor cultivated by years of battle. Since Lin Sun entered the ancient desolation realm, countless strong practitioners at the reincarnation developing realm had died in his hands, and most of them were peerless talents in the West Hung realm. The so-called great practitioners at the reincarnation developing realm of the Zheng clan were not qualified to carry the shoes of these peerless talents. Not to mention, there were also many half-step king realm experts who died in Lin Sun's hands. Under such circumstances, it would be a joke if Lin Sun still had any concerns. Old man, please lead the way for me. Child, you are so righteous. Although I am a useless old man, I am willing to serve you without any hesitation. The Zheng clan. The atmosphere in the magnificent hall was very subtle. The patriarch of the Zheng clan, Zheng Qianlong, sat upright on the main seat with an indifferent expression. His drooping eyes carried a trace of arrogance as he looked at a young man at the center of the hall, and his gaze didn't contain a trace of emotion. The young man's clothes were neat and tidy, and his face was like jade. He was quite handsome, but at this moment he sat on the ground aggrievedly and repeated the words, "I'm hungry. I'm hungry." This was Yu Jianfei. On both sides of the hall, there were many senior figures of the Zheng clan, men and women, old and young. At this moment, they did not hide their contempt, disgust, disdain, and mockery. That was because they knew that this well-dressed and talented fellow in front of them was, in fact, a natural-born fool. He was just a fool. How could he tell good from bad? Just like how he was sitting on the ground in the middle of the hall, being looked down upon by everyone, yet he didn't feel the slightest bit of humiliation. He only knew how to complain about being hungry. He was simply too stupid. "Nephew, it's fine if you want to eat your fill. Take out your marriage contract and accept the annulment unconditionally. Then, I'll reward you with a bowl of rice." Zheng Qianlong spoke, his expression indifferent. There was no mockery. For someone like him to bicker with a fool, that would be the true shame. "Uncle Zheng, what's an engagement annulment? Is it edible?" Yu Jianfei had a perplexed look on his face. Zheng Qianlong's face darkened. He felt a little impatient and said, "How about this? Just hand over the marriage contract." "What's a marriage contract? This should be edible, right?" Yu Jianfei continued asking. He did not hear the impatience in Zheng Qianlong's voice at all. He seemed very serious and curious. Everyone was speechless. He really is a big fool. "Big brother, why waste your breath on an idiot? Can't you just kill him?" A higher-up of the Zheng clan was extremely impatient. Killing an idiot isn't a big deal. But this idiot is Yu Jianming's younger brother in the end, so it's better to pay attention to the consequences. Zheng Qianlong spoke with an expressionless face. "Yu Jianming?" A middle-aged woman laughed with ridicule, and she spoke with a sharp and unkind tone. This genius that's renowned throughout the Fire Soul Prefecture was a proud and unyielding genius. For the sake of the infamous devil god Lin who slaughtered madly, he even gave up his life, and he truly died a heroic death. This Yu Jianming died at the right time. If he was still alive and others found out about his relationship with our Zheng clan, then wouldn't that be terrible? A white-haired old man stroked his beard and said, "He's a friend of Devil God Lin, and Devil God Lin has been targeted by the numerous ancient sects of the West Ocean world since a long time ago. Everyone has the right to kill Devil God Lin, and he's simply a great calamity. Anyone who comes into contact with him will suffer misfortune. If Yu Jianming didn't die, then our Zheng clan would probably be implicated in the future." The middle-aged woman chuckled. "Exactly. I heard that the Thousand Illusion Dao sect is already in a panic, and they don't even dare take revenge for Yu Jianming. Instead, they're drawing a line with Yu Jianming and announcing to the world that Yu Jianming brought it upon himself and deserved it. And it isn't related to their Thousand Illusion Dao sect. Even the Thousand Illusion Dao sect abandoned Yu Jianming. Our Zheng clan absolutely can't be implicated by this fellow. So we must deal with this idiot today." In the hall, everyone spoke one after another as they laughed and chatted freely without the slightest fear of being heard by Yu Jianfei. "I'm hungry. I'm really so hungry. I want to go home." Yu Jianming had been talking to himself since the beginning, and his face was covered in grievance. "Come, Jianfei, eat first." A beautiful young woman with a graceful figure walked into the hall while carrying steaming hot dishes. "Yin Xiao, what are you doing?" Zheng Qianlong frowned. "Father, let me do it." Zheng Yinxiao spoke with a warm voice, and she'd already squatted down to pass the dishes to Yu Jianfei. Yu Jianfei held up the bowl of rice and started wolfing it down, and he still spoke vaguely. "Xiao Xiao is still the best to me. Once my brother returns, I must ask him to personally arrange the marriage for us." A wave of ridicule resounded out in the hall. "This idiot is still thinking about getting married at a time like this. He's truly stupid to the extreme." Zheng Yinxiao said gently, "Jianfei, since you feel that I'm good to you, then can you tell me where exactly is our marriage agreement?" Yu Jianfei said with a dazed expression, "Xiao Xiao, what exactly is a marriage agreement? Why do all you want it?" Zheng Yinxiao was just about to explain when she saw Yu Jianfei had already buried his head in eating. "Xiao Xiao, can we speak after I'm full?" The gentle expression on Zheng Yunxiao's face instantly vanished and transformed into a livid expression of detest. The resentment that had been suppressed in her heart for a long time couldn't be controlled any longer, and she slapped away the bowl and chopsticks in Yu Jianfei's hand. Kacha! The bowl of rice shattered, and the splashing fragments were like sharp blades, brushing past Yu Jianfei's cheek, leaving a bloodstain. All of a sudden, Yu Jianfei was dumbfounded. His eyes widened, and his mouth was still stuffed with food. He had a silly and stupefied look. Qiao Qiao, did I do something wrong again? Seeing him like this, Zheng Yunxiao was so angry that her whole body trembled. She shouted in a sharp voice, "Eat, eat, eat. All you know is to eat. I've long had enough of you, idiot. All these years, if it wasn't because of your brother, do you think I would pay attention to a fool like you?" Yu Jianfei said in a daze, "Qiao Qiao, don't you like fools the most? So you've been lying to me all along." Zheng Yunxiao was so angry that her cheeks flushed red. "Shut up. Only an idiot likes a fool. Let me tell you, your brother is already dead. Your Yu clan only has you left as a fool. Do you think that trash like you wants to marry me? Wishful thinking." Yu Jianfei stiffened there. Although his mind was flawed, he was also a person of flesh and blood. He also had feelings. Suffering such a blow, he would similarly be sad and upset. You're lying. My brother can't possibly die." Yu Jianfei shouted. He was so agitated that his body trembled, and his eyes were red. "Qiao Qiao, you're lying to me, right? Is there a need for me to lie to a fool like you?" Zheng Yunxiao sneered. This is impossible. My brother said that he would help me cure my illness in the future, so that I can also cultivate like him. How could he lie? Yu Jianming's eyes were brimming with tears as he squatted on the ground. The wound on his cheek was dripping blood. The food and soup on the ground were scattered, making him look abnormally helpless and embarrassed. However, the crowd of Zheng clan members in the hall were indifferent. A fool was simply not worthy of their understanding and sympathy. "Where is the marriage contract? Are you going to tell me or not?" Zheng Yunxiao was completely impatient. The moment she learned of Yu Jianming's death, the resentment and anger that she had suppressed in her heart for many years could no longer be controlled. The heavens have eyes. She's finally freed herself from the shackles of fate, and she doesn't have to marry a fool any longer. Yu Jianfei was completely unaware as he sat on the ground and muttered in a daze. "My brother won't die. He'd never lie to me. He'll surely come back to look for me." Instantly, Zheng Yunxiao's rage couldn't be restrained from rushing in her mind, and she raised her right hand to slap Yu Jianming's face. This fool, if it wasn't for that marriage contract, she would have wished for nothing more than to kill him 1,000 times since long ago. When they saw Zheng Yunxiao's actions, all the great figures of the Zheng clan present understood, and no one stopped her. All of them had the same thought. He's only an idiot, so what if I kill him? If you dare make a move, then I'll make you wish you were dead, yet unable to. In the blink of an eye, right at the same time that Zheng Yunxiao raised her palm, an icy cold voice suddenly resounded in the hall. It was like a bone-piercingly cold blizzard had swept over, causing the temperature of the air to drop and the sky to wail, and the entire hall was filled with a suffocating pressure. Zheng Yunxiao's entire body stiffened. She felt it even more intensely, as if a sharp awl was fiercely pressed against her heart. If she dared to move, even a little bit, she would suffer unimaginable consequences. At this moment, she felt as if she'd been stared at by the god of death. At the same time, the pupils of the Zheng clan's higher-ups constricted, and their hearts trembled for a moment. Their expressions changed abruptly as they looked towards the outside of the hall. They saw that a youth dressed in moon-white clothes was already standing there at an unknown time. His long hair draped over his shoulders, revealing a handsome yet ice-cold face. Especially his eyes, which were as deep as an abyss, surged with a cold light that caused one's soul to tremble. Besides this youth, there was also an old servant standing beside him. The higher-ups of the Zheng clan recognized him with a single glance. He was the only old servant of the Yu clan, and he was just like a slave, not worth mentioning. However, they couldn't see through that youth, and this caused them to be bewildered. However, what they felt first wasn't fear, but anger. An old servant of the Yu clan, bringing along a youth, dared to barge into their Zheng clan. Wasn't this too presumptuous? As the number one power in Qianhu, the higher-ups of the Zheng clan were already used to acting tyrannically. Moreover, for many years, no one had dared to provoke them, causing them to develop an overbearing and despotic aura. Just like the saying that had been passed down in Qianhu, it was better to offend a ghost of the king of hell than to offend a dog of the Zheng clan. Chapter 944. It could be seen how domineering Zheng family was in Qianhu City. Therefore, even though they noticed that the boy's breath was extraordinary, the first reaction of the senior members of Zheng family in the hall was not fear, but anger. Second young master. The old servant let out a cry of grief and rushed over. He didn't expect that Yu Jianfei would squat on the ground with bloodstains on his face and scattered food in front of him. Obviously, he had suffered a lot of humiliation. How cruel you are! The old servant was so angry that his eyes almost popped out. Uncle One, they said that my brother will never come back. They're lying, aren't they? Yu Jianfei grasped the old servant's arm tightly, as if he had grasped a life-saving straw. What? Young master can't come back? The old servant was like being struck by lightning. He was stiff all over and lost his voice. Impossible. This is absolutely impossible. Young master is the successor of Thousand Illusion sect. How can he not come back? Hey, old man, I'm not afraid to tell you that Yu Jiaming is dead. Don't expect him to come back for you again. The middle-aged woman sneered. Also, the Thousand Illusions Dao sect has also issued a statement. Yu Jiaming's death is his own fault and has nothing to do with the Thousand Illusions Dao sect anymore. This also means that the Thousand Illusions Dao sect will no longer care about your Yu clan's idiot second young master. She was very proud, ignoring Lin Sun outside the hall, and took this opportunity to attack the old servant with vicious words. The old servant's vision darkened. He felt as if the sky was about to collapse. How could young master die? Like Yu Jianfei, he couldn't accept this bad news. Outside the hall, Lin Sun sighed in his heart and looked at Yu Jianfei with a complicated expression. The latter and Yu Jiaming were twins and looked exactly the same. Seeing him, Lin Sun couldn't help thinking of Yu Jiaming and the words he said before he died. You regard me as a friend, so I won't let you be threatened. At that moment, Yu Jiaming was resolute and calm, with an apologetic expression on his face. At the thought of this, Lin Sun felt suffocated as if his chest was filled with stones. He murmured in his heart, You regard me as your friend. How can I let your younger brother be humiliated? Old thing, you've come the right time. If you know what's good for you, then tell us where the marriage contract is. We've sent people to search the Yu clan, but we couldn't find the marriage contract no matter how hard we searched. Moreover, this fool doesn't know anything. Tell us, did you hide the marriage contract? The middle-aged woman stood up, her eyes cold. She scolded the old servant. Let me tell you, even if you brought help, it's useless. This is the Zheng family. In Qianhu City, no one dares to cause trouble in my Zheng family. So, you know that the eldest young master is dead. That's why you dare to humiliate our Yu clan. I finally understand that you are a bunch of ungrateful ingrates. The veins on the old servant's forehead bulged as he roared. Even if I die today, I will not hand over the marriage contract. I will make your Zheng family bear the infamy of being ungrateful for the rest of your life. You're courting death. The middle-aged woman was obviously used to running amok. She immediately stepped forward and slapped the old servant with her palm, intending to teach the old servant a lesson. Almost at the same time, Lin Sun awoke from his guilty thoughts. When he saw this scene, a frightening cold light burst out of his eyes. He had already revealed his pressure, but the other party did not restrain herself. Instead, she was still so domineering and arrogant. It could be seen how overbearing the Zheng family was in Qianhu City in the past. Swish! His figure flashed and appeared in front of the old servant. He stretched out his hand, grabbed the middle-aged woman's arm, and threw her out. With a bang, the middle-aged woman fell to the ground. She saw stars and screamed angrily. "You little brat! How dare you hit me and my Zhang family?" "Kneel!" Lin Sun's voice was low and cold. "You want me to kneel? How dare you?" The middle-aged woman became even more furious. In the past, she was used to acting like a tyrant in Qianhu City, and she had never suffered such a scolding. Her anger immediately rushed to her head, and she lost her mind. But before she could finish speaking, she felt as if a divine mountain was pressing down on her, and she knelt on the ground with a thump. The bones and tendons in her body cracked, and blood flowed from her 7 apertures. She almost fainted. She was shocked and opened her mouth to ask for help, but she could not make a sound. At the same time, the other great figures of the Zheng family were horrified, and their expressions changed abruptly. From the moment Lin Sun entered the hall to the moment the middle-aged woman knelt down, only a blink of an eye had passed. But the means Lin Sun revealed had already caused them to feel terrified. Originally, they thought that no matter how strong a young man was, he would not dare to rashly start a war with their Zheng family. At most, he would come to plead for the Yu family. So even though they were surprised and bewildered, they were not afraid. But now they could not sit still. "Little friend, no matter who you are, this is the territory of my Zheng family. Don't you think you've gone too far by rushing in like this?" The old man with white hair and beard spoke. "Taking advantage of your seniority, kneel down too." At this time, Lin Sun's eyebrows were like knives, his black eyes were cold like lightning, and his whole body was emitting a terrifying and frightening aura. He did not seem like an outsider, but more like the master of life and death here. Thump! As Lin Sun's voice fell, he did not seem to move, but the white-haired old man suddenly let out a scream. His body collapsed, and he knelt down on both knees. His old face was suffocated to the point that it turned purple. All of a sudden, the whole audience was silent. The Zheng family's higher-ups were not stupid. The reason why they were so fearless before was because they relied on their huge power in Qianhu City, which gave them great confidence. Moreover, Lin Sun was only one person, and a young man at that. They did not expect the other party's power to be so terrifying. Without making a move, with just a few words, he used his own power to force 2 of the Zheng family's higher-ups to kneel. This was too frightening. Where did the old servant of the Yu family find such a tyrannical person? "Young master, ignorance is not wrong. If I have offended you in any way before, please forgive me." A middle-aged man in embroidered robes took a deep breath, and a humble smile hung on his face. Humility and hypocrisy kneeled down. Lin Sun did not even look at him. With one sentence, the middle-aged man in embroidered robes also knelt down with a thud. His knees were cracked, and he let out a scream, and his cheeks were distorted. The hall became more and more silent. Everyone could not help but feel a touch of panic in their hearts. Who was this young man? How could he have such terrible power? Big trouble. Zheng Qianlong's heart fell to the bottom, and he felt cold all over. He realized that he had hit an iron plate this time. It was false that a strong dragon could not suppress a local snake. In the face of absolute strength, everything was no different from paper paste. "Uncle One, why did they all suddenly kneel down? Is it a magic trick?" Yu Jianfei opened his mouth in confusion, which was unusually loud in this deathly silent atmosphere. This was obviously absurd and ridiculous. If it was any other time, the big shots of the Zheng family present would definitely burst into laughter and humiliate him without hesitation. But now they could not laugh. Their faces were extremely stiff, as if they were grieving the death of their parents. The old servant had long been shocked by Lin Sun's overbearing and neat means. Moreover, his cultivation was shallow, so he could not see the mystery, so he naturally could not answer this question. "It's not a magic trick. They are atoning for their sins," Lin Sun said softly. "Atonement?" Yu Jianfei was confused. "Yes, they must pay for what they have done today." Lin Sun's words were like a heavy hammer, which made all the senior officials of the Zheng family a little confused and frightened. Was he not going to let it go? "Child, I can see that you are here for Yu Jianfei. In this case, why not discuss it? Why do you have to fight and kill?" Zheng Qianlong finally couldn't sit still. He stood up and said in a deep voice, "Our Zheng family has not treated you Jianfei unfairly these years. The reason why today's incident happened is also a misunderstanding. If there is any mistake, our Zheng family is willing to give adequate compensation." "What do you think, child?" "Misunderstanding?" A touch of coldness flashed through Lin Sun's black eyes. Before, he had already arrived at Zheng family. Covering this area with his spiritual awareness, he clearly heard the dialogue between Zheng Qianlong and the others. Naturally, he knew that this guy seemed to be sincere, but in fact, he was still lying. "Kneel down and talk." Lin Sun looked at him with his black eyes. As if his words were the law, a majesty spread out. "You!" Zheng Qianlong was furious. Caught unprepared, he was almost suppressed to kneel down. He struggled with all his strength. He was really shocked and angry. As the patriarch of Zheng family, he was absolutely a dominating existence in Qianhu City. If he knelt down, how could he gain a foothold in Qianhu City in the future? But to Zheng Qianlong's horror, no matter how he struggled, his body was forcibly pressed to the ground by a terrible and irresistible force in the blink of an eye. In this process, he was furious, roaring and struggling with all his might. But in the end, he still knelt down. No one knew how many bones in his body were broken. It was extremely tragic. "You are just a practitioner at the fulfillment of Sea Spirit Realm. Do you really think you can dominate this remote town?" Lin Sun's voice was indifferent. This was really like the saying, when there is no tiger in the mountain, the monkey becomes the king. Just like in Feiyun village of Xiao Empire, Lian Rufeng, a practitioner of the martial realm, dared to oppress all the villagers in the village and make them angry, but no one dared to resist. Why? Because there was no strong practitioner in Feiyun village. Obviously, Zheng family was in a similar situation. They thought they could be domineering in an inconspicuous town like Qianhu City. Why? Because there was no strong practitioner here who could threaten them. Unfortunately, they met Lin Sun today. Zheng Qianlong's kneeling made other senior members of Zheng family in the hall completely dumbfounded. They were scared out of their wits and trembled in fear. Before, they were still very conceited and full of confidence, never really afraid of Lin Sun. But now, they were like frosted eggplants. The contrast was so great that even the old servant of Yu family was stunned. Lin Sun's black eyes were like lightning as he glanced around. "Why don't you speak? Then all of you kneel down and be obedient." As soon as his voice fell, there was a sound of people kneeling on the ground in the hall. For a moment, except for Lin Sun, the old servant of Yu family, and Yu Jianfei, who was helped up, everyone else in the hall knelt down. From the beginning to the end, Lin Sun didn't move a finger at all. Such terrible power directly made those senior members of Zheng family feel desperate and realize that they had kicked a big iron plate this time. "If you want to kill us, just kill us. Why do you humiliate us like this? In the final analysis, aren't you relying on your own strength? In this case, what's wrong with us targeting Yu Jianfei like this?" But at this time, Zheng Yunxiao, who was also kneeling on the ground, seemed to be extremely indignant and screamed out, "Not good." Zheng Qianlong and others were all shocked. The provocation in these words was too strong. If they angered this young man, there would be a big disaster. Chapter 945. Zheng Yunxiao's angry question reverberated in the hall, making the atmosphere even more depressing. Unexpectedly, Lin Sun didn't attack her in anger. Instead, he nodded and said, "You're right. In this world, strength is everything, and the strong are above the weak." But Lin Sun changed the topic. His black eyes swept over all the senior members of the Zheng family coldly, and finally fell on Zheng Yunxiao. "Zheng family is wrong." "Why do you say that?" Zheng Yunxiao was not convinced. "Because I'm stronger than you, and my fist is bigger than yours. You humiliated my friend's brother, which is the same as humiliating my brother. What's wrong with asking you to kneel down and atone for your sins?" Lin Sun looked serious and calm, and every word he said was like thunder. His words seemed reasonable, but they were unreasonable and overbearing, which made Zheng Yunxiao speechless. "In the end, you're just taking advantage of your power to bully others," Zheng Yinxiao said fiercely after a while, her eyes full of resentment. I'm bullying your Zheng family, so what? Lin Sun said disdainfully. You're in the right just because you're weak? If you really understand what strength is, you won't ask such an idiotic question. Zheng Yunxiao's expression was uncertain, but in the end, she was disappointed. She knew that it was useless to say anything at this time. The hall was silent. All the senior members of the Zheng family, including Zheng Qianlong, knelt on the ground, terrified as if their parents had died. Seeing this scene, the old servant of the Yu family felt inexplicably happy. But when he thought that the young master might never come back, he couldn't help but feel sad. Sir, you've gone too far by making trouble in our Zheng family. Just then, an old voice sounded. The first elder. In an instant, Zheng Qianlong and the others' eyes lit up, and a glimmer of hope appeared in their originally terrified and helpless hearts. The first elder was a great practitioner of the reincarnation developing realm. He had been an adult for many years and was a great practitioner of the reincarnation developing realm. He was a well-known big shot not only in Qianyu City, but also in other nearby cities. In everyone's opinion, if the first elder came forward this time, perhaps there would be a turning point. Along with the voice, a graceful and dignified old man in a dark green robe walked in with large strides. His entire person had a kind of firm and unyielding aura, like a mountain. When he saw the people of the Zheng family kneeling on the ground, the practitioner narrowed his eyes imperceptibly, and a haze appeared between his eyebrows. Then he looked at Lin Sun and said, It turns out that you are a young talent who has stepped into the middle level of reincarnation developing realm. No wonder you are so fearless. His voice was indifferent and carried a hint of anger as he said to the people on the ground, I'm already here, so why are you still kneeling? Aren't you ashamed? Even though it was a reprimand, Zheng Qianlong and the others felt much calmer in their hearts instead. They felt that this was a sign that the Grand Elder was confident in his ability to capture that youth. But when they were just about to stand up, they felt the pressure in their surroundings rise abruptly, and it pressed down on them to the point they were almost unable to raise their heads while their bones and tendons almost broke. At the same time, Lin Sun said in a voice even calmer than that of a spiritual practitioner, Old guy, it's not good to be arrogant. Kneel down and talk to me. What an arrogant young man. Didn't your elders teach you manners? The face of the spiritual practitioner darkened. He thought that he had spoken politely enough and did not immediately make things difficult for Lin Sun. He did not expect that Lin Sun did not know how to appreciate his kindness and provoked him. You want to talk about manners? You old guy, do you deserve it? As Lin Sun spoke, he struck out with his palm. It was simple and direct, and it looked very sloppy and ordinary. You really want to die? The spiritual practitioner was completely enraged. With a rumble, a terrible power suddenly burst out of his body, and the divine light filled the air like an old dragon that had awakened from silence. He also struck out with his palm, and the momentum of his palm was fierce and bright. He was just a young man in the middle level of reincarnation developing realm, but he dared to be so arrogant. He must be an arrogant young man who had never experienced any twists and turns. He decided to teach Kuang Sheng an unforgettable lesson. Bang! However, the moment the palm energy collided, the spiritual practitioner was stunned. He found that his palm seemed to have hit a ball of cotton. There was a feeling of emptiness, and all the palm energy was swallowed up in an instant. The spiritual practitioner suddenly felt that something was wrong. However, when he was just about to change his move, he felt that the palm energy, which was originally like a ball of cotton, suddenly changed. It became as deep as an abyss, and it was boundlessly terrifying. With a crack, the spiritual practitioner's palm, fingers, and arm were instantly broken by a landslide in tsunami-like force, and blood burst out. Ah! The spiritual practitioner screamed. He was so shocked that his soul almost came out of his body, and he could not believe his eyes. Was this the power that a young man in the middle level of reincarnation developing realm should have? Boom! Before he could react, the terrible palm energy had shrouded his whole body. It was like a mountain pressing down on him, with an unshakable, majestic momentum. Instantly, under the astonished and terrified gazes of everyone present, the Grand Elder, who was like a stabilizing force in their hearts, actually knelt down with a thump, and his knees smashed onto the ground, causing a large hole to be smashed open on the ground while crushed rocks flew in all directions. The audience was silent. Everyone looked at Lin Sun as if they were looking at a demon, full of disbelief and fear. What kind of young man was he? The first elder, who was at the complete reincarnation developing realm, could not resist one blow from him and was forced to kneel down. It was too terrifying. Old man, do you think you are qualified to talk to me about etiquette now? Lin Sun's voice carried a hint of sarcasm. The old servant of the Yu family was also dumbfounded. Over the years, even Yu Jiaming had to be courteous in front of the spiritual practitioner, respecting his identity and strength. But who would have thought that the spiritual practitioner was so vulnerable in front of the young master's friend? Who are you? The veins on the spiritual practitioner's forehead bulged, and his cheeks were distorted. He felt endless shame and fear. I am Yu Jiaming's friend, Lin Sun said very seriously. He had never been so serious, and his words were absolutely from the heart. Unfortunately, the people of the Zheng family present did not understand. Who would believe that Lin Sun broke into the Zheng family alone and made a scene just for a friend? Suddenly, Lin Sun noticed that Yu Jianfei, who was not far away, was trembling violently as if he was possessed. He seemed to be in extreme pain. At the same time, the wordless pagoda also trembled slightly at this moment. It was caused by Yu Jiaming's corpse that was stored in it. Lin Sun sensed it in an instant. He moved his heart and pulled out the corpse. Young master, the old servant of the Yu family cried out sorrowfully as if he was struck by lightning. The people of the Zheng family were also stunned. Although they had already heard of Yu Jiaming's death, they were still a little surprised when they saw his corpse with their own eyes. Could it be that he is... The spiritual practitioner seemed to realize something. His pupil shrank as he looked at Lin Sun. His old face suddenly became extremely pale, and he was lost. Lin Sun did not notice this. He was completely attracted by the scene that happened in front of him. The corpse of Yu Jiaming, who was held in his arms, turned into a rain of light inch by inch at this moment. It fell on his younger brother, Yu Jianfei, and bathed his entire body in a dazzling halo. After a while, the rain of light disappeared. Yu Jianfei's body no longer trembled, and he regained his calmness. Moreover, his whole body glowed with an aura of being reborn, as if he had become completely different from before. After that, he let out a long breath of foul air and stood up. His gaze swept past the higher-ups of the Zheng family before finally looking at Lin Sun. Lin Sun, we meet again. He smiled with a wisp of gratitude. Thank you for bringing the other half of my soul back. Brother Yu? Lin Sun was moved. Even he felt slight disbelief. How could this be? This, on the other hand, the higher-ups of the Zheng family were directly dumbfounded. How could this idiot, Yu Jianfei, become another person in an instant? It really is him. It really is him. Only the spiritual practitioner felt as if he was struck by lightning when he heard the name Lin Sun. He was dumbfounded and his mind went blank. I'll explain the reason to you after I deal with the matter here. Yu Jianfei smiled. Lin Sun nodded. All right. The moment Yu Jianfei turned around and looked at the spiritual practitioner and the others, his entire body emitted a fierce and oppressive aura, like a sword that was deeply hidden in a sheath was unsheathed. I know what happened before. It's impossible to break off the engagement, but I can write a letter of divorce for you. Yu Jianfei's voice was calm. When you begged me to arrange this marriage a few years ago, I already knew this day would come, but I didn't expect it to come so soon. Letter of divorce. Zhang Yunxiao's vision darkened. She hadn't even gotten married, but she was directly divorced. If she carried such a reputation, how could she face others in the future? Who are you? Zheng Qianlong shouted, as if he had seen a living ghost. I'm Yu Jiaming, and also Yu Jianfei. Yu Jianfei said indifferently. All of a sudden, all the members of the Zheng family were dumbfounded, and their hearts were bleeding. If this was true, didn't it mean that if they didn't break off the engagement, Zheng Yunxiao would very likely marry Yu Jianming, the famous genius in the fire spirit state? But wasn't he already dead? How did he become like this? In the end, Zheng Yunxiao was divorced. This was the punishment Yu Jianfei gave to the Zheng family. Aren't you angry that they treated your brother like this? I thought you couldn't help but want to kill a few people. After walking out of the Zheng family, Lin Sun couldn't help but ask. Although they were slightly shameless, they could be considered to have helped me take care of my brother all these years. An eye for an eye, Yu Jianfei said. What about you? What exactly happened? Lin Sun asked. I knew you wouldn't be able to help but ask. Yu Jianfei smiled lightheartedly. Have you heard of one soul with two bodies? One soul with two bodies. Lin Sun immediately understood. This was an extremely rare innate attribute. One soul was residing in two bodies, and it was completely different from twins. The most peculiar thing was that people who possessed this attribute could not only bring immeasurable benefits to cultivation, but even if the other body was destroyed, they wouldn't die completely. The only drawback was that the two shared the same soul, and was bound to cause the other to become an idiot in the eyes of the world due to the lack of soul energy. This time, it was a blessing in disguise. I really experienced the feeling of death for the first time. Although I couldn't be enlightened, it gave me a new understanding of cultivation. Moreover, through this experience, I thoroughly discovered the origin mystery of the talent of one soul with two bodies. Maybe I'm likely to surpass you on the road of cultivation in the future. At this moment, Yu Jianfei was Yu Jianming, with a touch of confidence that Lin Sun was familiar with between his eyebrows. Lin Sun punched him on the shoulder and scolded with a smile. No wonder you died so quickly at that time. I was sad for nothing. But in his heart, there was a kind of indescribable joy. Let's go and have a drink. Until we get drunk? Yes, until we get drunk. Chapter 946. 1,000 cups were not enough to meet a bosom friend for a long time. For Lin Sun, Yu Jianming's ability to come back to life made him feel that it was better to get drunk in this situation. Tell me the truth, don't hit me. Say it. When I chose to commit suicide at the Tao Discussion Lantern Festival, I really didn't have much reluctance because I knew that I would come back to life one day. But I didn't expect that you would be so guilty. Ha ha ha. If the dignified demon god Lin was so guilty, what would the world think? Get out. Hey, don't look so ugly. Drink, drink. Lin Sun and Yu Jianming were drinking by the Green Willow Lake. More than a dozen large wine jars were scattered around them. The wine was Drunken Millennium, a special brew of Qianhu City. It tasted spicy and mellow, like fire in the throat. Both of them were slightly intoxicated, and if it wasn't for their cultivations, they would have probably lost consciousness long ago and fallen into a drunken dream. The Yu clan's old servant stood at a distance, smiling as he watched all of this. Just by watching, he felt very satisfied and happy. In order to avoid trouble, Thousand Illusion Sect has drawn a clear line with you. What are you going to do in the future? It's simple. I'll go my own way and comprehend my own Tao. The world is so big. Where can I, Yu Jianming, stand? Don't you hate them? Of course I hate them. I regard them as my home, but they regard me as an abandoned son. Anyway, they have done me a great favor. Even if I hate them, I won't ask for justice. It's good to cut off all ties with them. It seems that you've got over it. No, you're wrong. I haven't gotten over it. I'm not a saint who has achieved great enlightenment. Being abandoned like this, I also have a knot in my heart. Just you wait. One day, I will make the Thousand Illusion Tao sect regret this decision. That's like a man. I'm a man. After drinking, the two chatted a lot like two drunkards, chattering on the quiet Green Willow Lake, which startled many egrets. Until dusk, the setting sun dyed the green lake red. Yu Jianming, who was full of the smell of alcohol, got up and belched, I'm leaving Qianhu City. Where to? Wandering to the ends of the world. Yu Jianming chuckled. Then, he mounted a thin horse with mottled fur that was brought over by an old servant of the Yu family. He waved to Lin's son and rode away. He left in a carefree and unrestrained manner. Perhaps, it was just as he'd said before, he'd already died once. Even though he wasn't able to attain enlightenment, there were some things that he'd completely come to terms with. His departure this time was to walk his own path and seek his own Tao. Don't worry about not having a close friend in the future. Who in the world doesn't know you? Yu Jiaming's laughter came from afar. Lin Sun, I will go to Dongsheng territory to find you. His voice gradually became indistinct. Under the setting sun, the old servant led the skinny horse. Yu Jiaming's figure swayed as he walked far away. Lin Sun watched him go away. After a while, he said with a smile, "What bullsh asterisk tea? Go ahead." 2 days later, in Yindu City, in a private room of the Partridge Heaven restaurant, this was the place where Lin Sun and Bai Fenglu had agreed to meet 2 days ago. Bai Fenglu, the old fool, had already arrived. When he saw Lin Sun for the first time, he sighed with emotion. Who can imagine that Demon Lin, who has made the whole Shihing territory in chaos, is inviting me, Bai Fenglu, to dinner alone at this moment? As usual, this old fool was still so shameless and frivolous. Don't talk nonsense. I've come to ask you something this time, Lin Sun said angrily. Bai Fenglu rolled his eyes and said, "Let me guess, is it related to leaving Shiheng territory?" Lin Sun was surprised. "How do you know?" Bai Fenglu looked complacent and said with a smile, "Don't forget that I'm the man who will become the king of news. What happens in Shiheng territory can't be hidden from my eyes and ears." After the explanation, Lin Sun found out that many ancient orthodoxies had already analyzed that in such a precarious situation, it was very likely that he would choose to leave, because only in this way could he avoid many revenge attacks. Presently, the Xishar clan, Zhongli clan, Azure Phoenix clan, Jade Void Temple, Desolate Lightning clan, all the ancient powers have announced that anyone who dares to help you, Fiend God Lin, leave Westhung World will be their common enemy, and they will surely suffer the calamity of annihilation. Bai Fenglio's expression suddenly became serious, and he said, "At the same time, these forces have sent all kinds of forces to search for your traces in Shihing territory with all their might. Moreover, they have issued an astonishing bounty order. It seems that they want to kill you." Lin Sun's black eyes suddenly narrowed. Only now did he realize that although the Tao Discussion Lantern Festival had come to an end, his situation had become more and more pessimistic. "It seems that they are still bullying me because I haven't killed enough people," he muttered to himself. Bai Fenglu hurriedly said, "Don't act recklessly. I heard that in order to deal with you this time, many old monsters of the King Realm are ready to move out." Lin Sun fell silent for a while. In the final analysis, they were bullying him because he was alone and had no one to rely on. Bai Fenglu sighed, "It's too difficult to fight against those ancient orthodoxies alone. It's no different from a mantis trying to stop a chariot. I advise you to calm down no matter what, and leave Shihing territory to lie low." Lin Sun nodded and said, "I won't act recklessly." He had originally planned to go to Dongsheng territory. Although he hated those ancient orthodoxies for bullying him, he also knew that before he stepped into the King Realm, he could only avoid the sharp edge for the time being and leave the dangerous whirlpool of Shihing territory. Of course, even if he didn't leave, Lin Sun wasn't afraid of all this. He still had many trump cards in his hand. Even if he couldn't wipe out all those ancient orthodoxies, it was enough to make them suffer a great loss. The destruction of the nests of the Black Demon Tengu clan in Shihing territory was the best proof. That being said, Lin Sun wouldn't go to the mysterious woman in the secret realm for help if he wasn't at the end of the line. The mysterious woman promised to help him 3 times, and he had used it once. He didn't want to waste such a precious opportunity on unnecessary things. By the way, who won the first chance at the Tao Discussion Lantern Festival? Lin Sun suddenly asked. Bai Fenglu shook his head. "I don't know. Maybe it was Ji Xingyao, or maybe it was Lorger, the future leader of the Miluo Palace in the Earth Imperial Universe." Speaking of this, Bai Fenglu remembered something. He said mysteriously, "Do you know that Yu Lingkong is not dead?" Sure enough, Lin Sun was shocked. Even though Bai Lingshi had already told him about this, he still felt a bit emotional when he heard Bai Fenglio's confirmation. It was indeed too difficult to kill a peerless figure like Yu Lingkong. It is said that this guy was saved by the Hall of Immortality. But because of his serious injuries, he left the Shihing territory in a hurry and went back to the southern Xian universe to recover fully. Before he left, he said that the next time he saw you, it would be the day of your death. Bai Fengliu's expression carried a trace of seriousness. I have to admit that you Linkong's resources are simply too terrifying. You've killed him once. I suspect that no matter if it's the blessed lands of longevity or the Yu clan, both of them will stand on Yu Linkong's side and view you as a thorn in their side. Hearing this, Lin Sun smiled. There were many forces that regarded him as an enemy, but he was still alive and well. He said casually, "This guy still doesn't learn his lesson after dying once. How dare he say such big words? Let's see who will have a last laugh." Bai Fengliu gave him a thumbs up and complimented, "I'm not impressed by anyone but you, Demon God Lin. You're able to stir up chaos in the world all by yourself. Throughout the ages and in the present world, which genius could have such courage and methods?" Lin Sun was speechless. "Can you stop annoying me like this?" Bai Fengliu grinned. "Okay, let's get down to business. You can't leave the Shihing territory with the help of the ancient teleportation formation, but there is a way. Tell me." According to the latest news, the boundary river between the Dongshan territory, the Shihing territory, the Big Dipper territory, and the Nanshan territory is undergoing an unprecedented change. In short, the boundary river is gradually disappearing. Disappearing? Yes. According to the analysis of some old monsters, this change is very likely to make the four realms, which were originally divided, merge into one again. The ancient desolation will end the state of division and return to the complete state in the ancient times. However, it is just a beginning. According to speculation, when the Great Era comes, the four realms of the ancient desolation will break the pattern of isolation and completely return to a complete world. And this change is also regarded as one of the signs of the coming Great Era. At that time, the four realms will be united, and the ancient desolation is bound to show a new pattern of the Great Era. Speaking of this, Bai Fengliu couldn't help but feel excited. The four realms had been separated from each other for countless years, blocking the way of countless practitioners. To ordinary cultivators, traversing a world to cultivate in another world was simply more difficult than ascending the heavens because the dangerous and unfathomable boundary river obstructed their path. Now, the signs of the four realms being united had appeared, and an unprecedented great era was bound to come. Who wouldn't be excited? Lin Sun couldn't help but be moved. As far as he knew, the four realms of the ancient desolation were indeed a complete world in the ancient times. But later, because of a shocking change, the ancient desolation was broken and divided into the four realms, which had continued to this day. If there was a possibility of the four realms being united and restored to a complete state, it was indeed an unprecedented change for any practitioner. Of course, it is still too early to say this, but it is an indisputable fact that the power of the boundary river is fading. Nowadays, many practitioners in the Shihing territory have begun to explore the secret of the shocking change of the boundary river, trying to find a way to the Nirvana world. Bai Fengliu said, "If you want to leave, you may choose to cross the boundary river." Cross the boundary river? Lin Sun was thoughtful. "Yes, think about it first. If you really decide to do so, I can arrange a new identity for you. You can join a team and set off in 3 days." Chapter 9:47. 3 days later, Yin capital, outside the western suburbs of the city gate. Dawn had just broken, and a group of people were already waiting there. "Everyone, let me introduce him to you. This is Lin Xia, a spiritual celestial master who is proficient in seeking fortune and avoiding calamity, as well as probing acupoints and looking for meridians. This time, he will be crossing the Realm River to travel and cultivate in the East Victory Domain. I'll have to trouble everyone to look after him along the way." Bai Fengliu introduced them warmly. Lin Xia was Lin Sun's new name to hide his identity. After deciding to cross the border river, he had already used the great formless skill to change his appearance and temperament. The group of people looked at Lin Sun, who was beside Bai Fengliu, and found that he was just a young man at the Tao Insight Realm. His appearance was not outstanding, so they looked away. Lin Xia, let me introduce you to these cultivators. Bai Fenglu chattered for a long time. Obviously, he was very familiar with this group of people. But Lin Sun frowned imperceptibly. This team was considered elite. There were 16 people in total, and each of them had a strong and capable aura. The strongest was at the Reincarnation Development realm, and the weakest was at the Tao Insight realm. But in Lin Sun's opinion, it was not enough for such a team to cross the extremely dangerous border river that even the old monsters of the King realm did not dare to enter easily. Don't worry, these are all ruthless people who often appear near the border river. They are an experienced team of adventurers. Bai Fenglu seemed to see through Lin Sun's doubts and explained telepathically. Bai Fenglu seemed to see through Lin Sun's doubts and explained telepathically. The boundary river may be extremely dangerous, but for ruthless people like them, they have their own ways to save their lives. This time, they were hired to protect a mysterious person across the boundary river to the Dongxing territory on the other side. If you go with them, you can conceal your identity, and it'll be relatively safer for you to cross the boundary river. Lin Sun nodded. He had heard that although the border river was extremely dangerous, there were many spiritual materials and treasures that were rarely seen in the outside world. Many years ago, there were many explorers and desperados who went there in search of wealth or opportunities. Similarly, there was no lack of villains who had committed atrocities and chosen to escape into the border river to avoid being killed. Up until now, the area within the boundary river had long since become a place where explorers and outlaws gathered. Moreover, numerous dark and evil powers of various sizes have been formed there. Of course, this was the outer region of the boundary river. The depths of the boundary river were still like a restricted area, and even these explorers and desperados rarely dared to step foot into it. It was obvious that the team that Bai Fenglu had found was made up of a group of adventurers. Moreover, they had been through a lot and were very experienced. Let's go. It won't be long before I go to the East Victory Realm. That place is the heart of the ancient Desolation Realm, and it's called the home of all saints. Similarly, whether I can become the King of News whose name has shaken the world depends entirely on whether I can make a name for myself in the East Victory Realm. Before leaving, Bai Fenglu appeared very heroic, ambitious, and complacent. Take care. Lin Sun nodded. During the first test of the Tao Discussion Lantern Festival, Lin Sun had obtained many Ice Mountain Fire Lotuses. He refined one himself and obtained the Fire Refining Star River method. He gave the rest to Yu Jiaming and Bai Fenglu respectively. It could be said that Lin Sun didn't have many friends in the West Hung realm, and Yu Jiaming and Bai Fenglu were undoubtedly the two most trustworthy. Whoosh! In the clouds, a treasure ship rushed toward the easternmost place of the West Hung realm, crushing the airwaves. On the treasure ship, the members of the team of adventurers were discussing something, while Lin Sun was thinking in one of the rooms. They had set off for several hours. After a short contact, Lin Sun had a general understanding of this team of adventurers. The leader of this team was a man with a vigorous temperament like a cheetah. His name was Ko Xing. He was slender and thin, with bronze skin and a cold expression. He carried 2 sabers on his back, and his every move revealed a sense of competence and neatness. He had the cultivation of the upper level of the wheel developing realm. In addition, there was also a man and a woman who caught Lin Sun's attention. One of them, nicknamed Green-Faced, was majestic and mighty, and his skin was covered with dense tattoos, especially his face, which was covered with fine green veins, giving people a very creepy feeling. According to the introduction of Bai Fenglu, this person came from the Green Blood clan and was born with an extremely keen insight to danger. He had the cultivation of the initial level of the wheel developing realm and was taciturn. The other one, nicknamed Chulian, was charming and enchanting, with a hot and sexy figure, a pair of seductive peach blossom eyes, and 2 small red snakes hanging from her ears. Like Green-Faced, she was also in the initial level of the wheel developing realm and had a shrewd character. This team was obviously led by these 3 people. Although the rest of the people had different cultivation, their auras were extremely fierce. At first glance, Lin Sun could tell that they were experienced veterans. In addition, there was also a mysterious person in the team. This team was also hired by this mysterious person. When they boarded this treasure ship, Lin Sun had seen this person before, but he was a little surprised because the mysterious person was actually a sickly girl. The girl was about 17 or 18 years old, with a beautiful face and a gentle temperament. She was dressed as a man and wore black clothes, but her eyebrows were tightly furrowed, and her skin was abnormally pale. She walked like a willow in the wind, giving people a feeling of sickly delicateness. In the conversation between Ko Xing, green-faced, and Chilian, they all called this girl Miss Lu. Knowing that there was an extra person like Lin Sun on this trip, Miss Lu was obviously a little conflicted. After some discussion, she finally allowed Lin Sun to go with them. Miss Lu also wanted to go to the Dongshang boundary, but Lin Sun keenly noticed that she seemed to have a very heavy heart. Her eyebrows were tightly furrowed along the way, and she seemed to be very quiet in her room. Lin Sun had originally planned to inquire about some information about the Dongshang boundary, but he could only give up now. Before long, Lin Sun casually set up a simple restriction to isolate the outside world from prying. Then, Xia Ji appeared. She had just woken up, and as soon as she saw Lin Sun, the first thing she said was, "Lin Sun, I'm hungry." Lin Sun was speechless. Fortunately, he had already expected this scene and had prepared some food in advance. The grains of translucent, snow-white, and soft rice were placed within a verdant lotus leaf, and it emanated a refreshing fragrance and dense spirit energy. In addition, there was a plate of braised sea shark meat and a plate of roasted cyan phoenix wings, both of which were very large in size. They looked, smelled, and were enough for more than 10 people to enjoy together. This kind of food was, of course, extremely rare. It was the spoils of war left by Lin Sun when he killed Sha Luchan and seriously injured Qing Lianer. Now it was cooked by him as food for Xia Ji to enjoy. If the experts of these two clans saw it, they would definitely go berserk with anger. Holding the bowl and chopsticks, Xia Ji sat there quietly and then began to chew and enjoy. Her speed was neither fast nor slow, but her appetite was very big, and she never stopped eating from beginning to end. Lin Sun looked at this scene with a smile. After a while, he thought of something and said regretfully, "It's a pity that I've eaten up the black demon dog meat. It's delicious. Whether it's stewed, stir-fried, barbecued, or fried, it's the best." Xia Ji ignored him and continued to eat. Her delicate body was like a bottomless pit, devouring one portion of rice after another, and the cyan lotus leaves beside her were piled up into a thick pile. If Lin Sun hadn't prepared well, he would not have been able to satisfy Xia Ji's appetite. After a long time, Xia Ji put down the bowl and chopsticks, raised her eyes as clear as the crescent moon, looked at Lin Sun, and said seriously, "If there's something good in the future, you can't enjoy it alone." Lin Sun also promised seriously, "It won't happen again." Xia Ji nodded and suddenly said, "I have a question." "Go ahead." Lin Sun picked up a cup of tea and asked curiously. After thinking for a long time, Xia Ji said, "Lin Sun, how many women do you have outside?" Puff. Lin Sun spat out a mouthful of tea, choked and coughed. He stared at the little girl in front of him strangely and said angrily, "Why do you suddenly ask such a question? Do I look like the kind of person who likes to flirt with women?" Xia Ji frowned and thought for a while before saying, "Yes." Lin Sun was speechless. He had never been in contact with a woman since he started his cultivation. How could he have a woman outside? Sometimes Lin Sun felt that he was more lonely than a sadhu, but now he was slandered by Xia Ji, which was absolutely intolerable. However, when he was about to say something, Xia Ji said, "You don't have to explain. I don't like you lying to me." Lin Sun almost fainted. It was so unjust. If he really had so many confidants, it would be fine. But the point was that he didn't have any until now. Anyway, if you want to marry a wife in the future, you have to get through me first. Xia Ji looked at Lin Sun, and her beautiful and flawless face was full of seriousness. What? Lin Sun was annoyed. because it will be very difficult to accommodate a second person besides you in my world, Xia Ji answered, as if it was a matter of course. Lin Sun was speechless. He suddenly found that when facing Xia Ji, who was serious, no matter what he said, it seemed very powerless. Because she didn't listen to him at all. If I had known this, I would have been in contact with more girls. Lin Sun was stunned and regretted that he had lived too monotonous in the early years. He actually didn't hook up with some beautiful girls to enrich his feelings on the road of cultivation. It was so not worth it. What did you say? Xia Ji raised her eyebrows, with a rare questioning expression on her extremely beautiful face. Nothing. I am thinking about going to Dongxing territory. Lin Sun changed the topic decisively. He felt that if they continued to talk about it, he would definitely collapse under Xia Ji's arbitrary and calm words. Then you think about it yourself. I'm going to sleep. Xia Ji was no longer serious. After eating and drinking, she began to feel sleepy as usual. Chapter 948. This was a golden message tree leaf, a gift from Bai Fenglu. When Bai Fenglu heard that Lin Sun was going to Dongshang territory to inquire about Yun Qingbai, he was shocked at first, but he didn't ask much in the end. Instead, he spent a day returning to the residence of the Wind Talker clan. When he returned, he gave this golden message tree leaf to Lin Sun. It recorded a battle scene about Yun Qingbai, which was accidentally seen by the secret agent of the Wind Talker clan. However, because Yun Qingbai's influence in the ancient Desolation realm was too great, this news was carefully sealed by the high-level officials of the Wind Talker clan before it had time to spread. This time, it was all thanks to Bai Fengliu's appearance that they managed to obtain this golden message tree leaf. Otherwise, as long as Yun Qingbai was still alive, the information recorded on it would probably never see the light of day again. With a strange wave, the golden message tree leaf unfolded, flowing with a magnificent luster, and finally turned into a light curtain. On the light curtain, a white-robed man stood on the shore of a blood sea. His clothes and black hair were fluttering in the wind, revealing a calm and indifferent face. He was tall and straight, like a sword piercing the air. His face was incomparably handsome. Just by standing there casually, he had a great spirit of looking down on the world. His style was peerless. The blood sea was surging, demonic, and terrifying. In a roar, a huge blood-colored dragon soared into the sky, setting off thousands of blood waves. Its body was as thick as a house, and it was thousands of meters long. It was covered with cold and fine blood-colored dragon scales, and its pair of blood-colored eyes were like a lake, reflecting everything in the world. It raised its head and roared while its body resided in space, and an indescribably terrifying aura suffused the heavens and the earth. It caused the entire sea of blood to rumble and surge while space in an area of 5,000 kilometers collapsed inch by inch, and its might was terrifying to the extreme. Just looking at it made Lin Sun feel a kind of oppressive aura, a blood-colored dragon that had stepped into the half-step king realm. Moreover, because of the dragon's breath in its bloodline, its combat power was more terrifying and powerful than other half-step king realm experts. The white-robed man moved. He stepped in the void and moved straight forward. His whole body emitted a fierce sword intent, like a shining sun, dazzling. Boom! The blood dragon swung its tail and unleashed a terrifying mystic art. Streaks of blood-colored runes surged towards the white-robed man. However, these attacks hadn't even approached him when they seemed as if they'd collided with an invisible wall, and they dispersed with a bang and were actually unable to cause any harm. Lin Sun's pupils suddenly shrank. This was the invisible power of Sword Tao, but it seemed to be real. It protected the white-robed man and made him invincible. The blood dragon seemed to be enraged. Its sparkling and resplendent blood-colored body glowed, and a circle of ripples that looked like Tao patterns appeared and spread out in the void. Boom! The heavens and the earth shook. The blood-colored Tao markings were obscure and profound, and they were filled with the aura of the grand Tao that belonged to the Dragon Clan. It caused the heavens and the earth to dim while all things collapsed, and it was terrifying to the extreme. According to Lin Sun's own calculation, it would take a lot of effort for him to resolve this blow without the help of the wordless pagoda and insignificant bow. However, the white-robed man merely swung his hand casually before a strand of almost ethereal sword insight slashed out, and it easily destroyed all of this. Clang! Then, in the eyes of the white-robed man, a pair of blazing divine rainbows suddenly burst out, intertwined and fused together, and turned into a Taoist sword. The sword was 3 feet and 3 inches long, 4 fingers wide, and covered with dense, obscure patterns. As soon as it appeared, the heavens and the earth trembled, and the void was in disorder. An indescribable heavenly sword intent emerged in the world, which seemed to be able to amaze both ancient and modern times. Lin Sun felt a stabbing pain in front of his eyes, and he couldn't see anything. At the same time, the screen of light suddenly disappeared and ended abruptly. No one knew if the blood dragon still had a chance to survive under that incomparably breathtaking sword strike that reached the heavens. There was silence in the room. Lin Sun recalled the sword in his mind. The more he tried to figure it out, the more palpitations he felt. The aura of the Grand Tao was too strong and vast, sharp and terrifying to the extreme. Unconsciously, the back of Lin Sun's clothes had been soaked with a layer of cold sweat. Yin Qingbai, the white-robed man, was the legendary figure who was known as the first sword practitioner in the ancient Desolation territory. He was known to be invincible under the King realm. But for Lin Sun, this man only had one identity. That was the culprit who killed all the relatives and friends of the Lin family. 5 years ago, he was already so powerful. Lin Sun murmured with a heavy heart. Although it was only a short scene, Lin Sun realized how terrible his enemy was after witnessing Yun Qingbai's battle with his own eyes. This was a battle that took place 5 years ago. For a peerless figure like Yun Qingbai, 5 years was enough for his strength to undergo a great transformation again. Even Lin Sun couldn't figure out how powerful Yun Qingbai had become today. His energy is extremely pure, his foundation is extremely deep, and his grasp of the energy of the Grand Tao has even attained perfection. If I were to fight him now, then I only have 20% confidence in defeating him, and I don't even have 10% confidence in killing him. Beside him, Xia Ji said softly. Her voice was clear and sweet like the sound of nature. But her words made Lin Sun look more and more serious. In the battle just now, Yin Qingbai was only at the upper level of the reincarnation development realm, but Xia Ji admitted that she couldn't kill him. It could be imagined how powerful Yun Qingbai was. It should be noted that at the Tao Discussion Lantern Festival, when Xia Ji killed Mu Jianting, Li Qinghuan, and other peerless figures, she only used one move to wipe them out one by one. But it's also impossible for him to kill me. Xia Ji commented seriously. Her beautiful face, which was enough to overshadow the world, was full of thoughts. If you are his enemy, it seems that you have little chance of winning if you only compete with your own combat power. It was a battle 5 years ago, Lin Sun reminded her. Then it's even more hopeless, Xia Ji said casually. Xia Ji said casually. This was Xia Ji. She would never deceive Lin Sun, nor would she speak tactfully. She didn't mean to hurt Lin Sun. Lin Sun was silent for a while. The enemy's strength was completely beyond his expectation. At this moment, he deeply understood that even if he found Yun Qingbai now, it was doomed to be hopeless for him to take revenge. But I'm more optimistic about you, Xia Ji suddenly said. When did I fall to the point where I need you to comfort me? Lin Sun said with a wry smile. I'm serious, Xia Ji said. Do you think I'm wrong about you? Lin Sun didn't know how to answer, but he enjoyed it. Yun Qingbai's peerless power just now had a great impact on him. Believe me, you just started a little later than him. You are destined to surpass him in the future. Xia Ji's words were calm, but there was a sense of certainty in them. Undoubtedly, this was a kind of absolute confidence in Lin Sun. Then she went to sleep. Yun Qingbai might be very powerful, but she wasn't interested in him at all, and he couldn't affect her at all. Perhaps in her world, except for cultivation, there was only room for Lin Sun. In the following time, Lin Sun repeatedly watched the scenes of the battle recorded on the golden leaf. But different from before, his mentality had changed. He became calm and firm, observing the strength of the enemy to verify his own strength. The best way to defeat the enemy was to thoroughly understand the enemy first. Yun Qingbai's strength shocked Lin Sun, but it also aroused his unprecedented fighting spirit. He was never a person who gave up easily. Otherwise, he wouldn't have made such achievements after coming out of a remote prison. As Xie Ji said, Yin Qingbai's advantage was that he set foot on the road of cultivation earlier than Lin Sun. Before Lin Sun was born, Yin Qingbai was already a well-known peerless figure in the heaven-reaching sword sect. Moreover, Yin Qingbai's strength today was not glorious, and he didn't use the power he possessed. At least, without the spiritual vein he dug out from Lin Sun, he was doomed to not have today's prestige. In contrast, the only thing Lin Sun lacked at present might be time. You're getting stronger, but so am I. One day, I will become even stronger than you. After a long time, Lin Sun took a deep breath and became more determined. His whole person seemed to have undergone a transformation, with a clear and ethereal aura. Half a month later, the treasure ship carrying Lin Sun and his party finally arrived at their destination. Wenshui City was located near the easternmost part of the West Hung Territory, adjacent to the Boundary River. Compared to the past, Wenshui City had recently become abnormally lively. Many cultivators from all over the world had gathered here. The reason was very simple. The Boundary River had undergone a shocking change and was gradually receding, which was very likely a sign of the unification of the four realms. In order to explore the origin of this shocking change, many strong practitioners in the West Hung Territory had been attracted. Moreover, recently, many strong practitioners who had gone to explore the Boundary River had more or less obtained some opportunities. There were ancient treasures that had never been seen before, rare and strange spiritual materials, and some relics and broken antiques that only existed in ancient times. These items had occasionally been discovered in the past, but not as frequently as they had been discovered recently. When the waves receded, they would reveal the shells and pearls left on the beach. Similarly, if the Boundary River was really gradually receding, then some of the secrets and opportunities hidden in it would inevitably emerge in the world. In any case, all these signs undoubtedly indicated that some kind of shocking change was indeed taking place in the Boundary River. Big news! An expert of the Silver Electric Sable clan risked his life to enter an ancient relic in the Boundary River and found a broken bloodstained spear. Although it was mottled and decayed, the blood on it was suffused with a trace of a true saint's aura. If nothing unexpected happens, this broken ancient spear has drunk the blood of a saint. When Lin Sun and his party entered Wenshui City, they happened to hear this sensational news that had just come back today. Chapter 949. A broken spear that was suspected to have been stained with the blood of a saint. This news was truly shocking. The Boundary River had changed, and such a treasure had appeared. It was easy to imagine how many cultivators would come to search for it once the news got out. Since ancient times, there's always been a rumor that in ancient times, there was an unprecedented war between the saints. At that time, the sky was covered in a rain of blood, all things were in darkness, and the world was filled with an aura of destruction as if it was the end of the world. This strange phenomenon lasted for 100 days. Because of this saint war, the ancient desolation realm was severely damaged, and it was divided into 4 great realms, which have continued to this day. And that Boundary River is the crack of the ancient desolation realm, where all living beings fought the most fiercely. On the way, the charming and enchanting Qi Lian said softly, "Now it seems that this rumor may very well be true." The group rested for a while in Wenshui City, then flew toward the Boundary River several hundred li away from the city. Along the way, they could see many groups of cultivators moving. They were in groups of 3 to 5, flying in the void. It was a spectacular sight. Among them were explorers who often appeared near the Boundary River, and there were also some cultivators who had recently arrived from all over the Western Hung realm. There were even cultivators from ancient powers. The change in the Boundary River has attracted the attention of everyone in the world. This place is destined to become a place of trouble. There will be many disturbances. Ko Xing, who was in the lead, spoke. He carried 2 sabers on his back and had a sharp and cold temperament. Seeing this lively and noisy scene, he couldn't help but frown. We must act quickly. Immediately, the group quickened their pace. In front of the Boundary River, a strange and vast silver current rolled down from the sky, surging through the void and then pouring into the seemingly endless Boundary River. From a distance, the sky and the water were connected, vast and turbulent. It didn't look like a river at all, but a boundless sea, lying there like a barrier between worlds. In the Boundary River, thunder and lightning roared, and time and space were in disorder. Sometimes a terrifying black hole flashed, releasing a destructive aura that seemed to want to devour everything. This was the Boundary River, blocking the 4 great realms of the ancient Desolation Realm. It was like a natural moat, blocking the path of countless cultivators. The Border River was also regarded as a famous, dangerous place in the ancient Desolation Realm. There were many strange and ominous things in it. It was mysterious and terrifying. There was once a true king who tried to cross the Border River and reach the other side of the world, but he fell halfway, not even his corpse remaining. It was said that the one who killed this king was merely an unremarkable red fish. Moreover, there were many similar legends, and it caused the Boundary River to become a forbidden area. Even the old fellows at the King Realm weren't willing to set foot in it rashly. However, unlike in the past, following the shocking changes that occurred, the Boundary River today was no longer as violent and vicious as before, becoming comparatively quieter. But even then, it could still be said to be dangerous, mysterious, and ominous. When Lin Sun and the others arrived, they were a little stunned, because the banks of the Boundary River had actually been sealed off by a group of cultivator powers, and they'd set up a barrier there. Anyone who intended to enter or leave the Boundary River had to pass through an inspection. At this moment, there were already many practitioners lined up in a long line, waiting to be inspected. All of them seemed to be very well behaved. What's going on? Ko Xing, who was in the lead, stopped the cultivator and questioned him. Those are experts from the Thousand Illusion Dao sect. They sealed off this area in order to capture demonic god Lin and prevent him from escaping the West Hung world through the Boundary River, explained the cultivator patiently. The cultivator explained patiently. Now, it's not just this region. All the regions near the World River in the other regions of Western Hung world are under the control of different ancient factions. Their goal is to capture Fiend Celestial Lin. So as to capture demonic god Lin. Ko Xing, green-faced assassin, and Qi Lian came to a sudden understanding. Only Lin Sun raised his brows as he thought to himself, Bai Feng Lu is right. These ancient orthodoxies are going all out in order to capture me. How could a peerless figure like demonic god Lin be captured so easily? Green-faced assassin grunted coldly. These ancient orthodoxies are clearly bullying others. Deaths are unavoidable during the battles during the Dao Discussion Lantern Festival. Could it be that only they're allowed to kill demonic god Lin, but demonic god Lin isn't allowed to counterattack? Qi Lian had a look of contempt and disdain. Lin Sun was surprised. He never expected green-faced assassin and Qi Lian to mention his injustice. Cut it out. Be it demonic god Lin or those ancient orthodoxies, it's not something people like us can discuss. Ko Xing, who was leading the group, berated with a frown. Immediately, green-faced assassin and Qi Lian shut their mouths. The demonic god Lin you speak of is that Lin Sun who slayed a group of elites at the Dao Discussion Lantern Festival? Suddenly, Miss Lu, who was walking in the middle of the group, spoke. She was dressed in black and was disguised as a man. Her beautiful face was pale, and she exuded a sickly aura. That's right. Ko Xing nodded. Miss Lu tersely acknowledged and did not speak further. She seemed to have something on her mind as her brows were tightly knitted. Everyone waited patiently in line for 5 minutes before it was their turn to be inspected. A thousand illusion Tao sect disciple held a bronze disc that shimmered with spiritual patterns. It suffused a resplendent glow as he inspected Ko Xing and company one by one. The bronze disc was known as the illusion breaker mirror. Any cultivator who cast an illusion to disguise themselves would be exposed. Unfortunately, although it was mysterious, it was ineffective against the grand formless skill. This was not an illusion, but an ancestral skill of the Green Hill Divine Fox family. It was so marvelous that even the old freaks in the King realm could not see through it, let alone a mere illusion breaker mirror. Lin Sun accepted the inspection calmly and passed it smoothly. However, just when he was about to leave, he inadvertently noticed a familiar figure in the corner of his eye. That person was wearing a purple dress. Her figure was graceful, her eyebrows and eyes were picturesque, her face was as still as water, her forehead was white and shiny, her eyes were clear and bright, and her whole body was surrounded by a mellow and holy aura, looking mysterious and transcendent. It was Loka, the future leader of the Miluo Palace from the Earth Imperial Universe. At this time, she was talking with a young man in a feather robe beside her. She behaved in a demure manner, like an orchid in an empty valley. Why was she here? Lin Sun was stunned. He immediately withdrew his gaze, stopped thinking about it, and walked forward. There was no enmity between him and Loka. Moreover, they had never quarreled at the Tao Discussion Lantern Festival, so he would not have any other ideas because of her appearance. Loka, is that demon god Lin really so terrible? On the other side, the young man in a feather robe frowned. Loka thought for a moment and said, like you and me, he has set foot on the peerless path, and he also has a holy treasure. Before Loka finished speaking, the eyes of the young man in a feather robe lit up. Is it true? Do you recognize the origin of that holy treasure? Loka shook her head. I can only recognize that it is a pagoda made of divine iron of creation. Its power is not very terrifying, but it can restrain the power of the immortal hall. Obviously, it is extraordinary. Divine iron of creation. The eyes of the young man in a feather robe surged with scorching divine light, as if he was staring at an extremely tempting prey. His whole body exuded a frightening power, causing the faces of many practitioners nearby to change, and their hearts to be filled with horror. A legendary treasure like the divine creation metal is a divine item that can drive sages crazy. And for Fiend Celestial Lin to possess a pagoda made of divine creation metal, that treasure is definitely no trifling matter. There was a touch of fanaticism in the tone of the young man in a feather robe. Loka, do you think it is possible that Demon God Lin will choose to cross the boundary river and leave the West Hung territory? Loka knew that the young man in a feather robe had his eyes on the holy treasure in Lin Sun's hands, so he could not help but remind, if Yu Linkong hadn't been saved by the immortal hall, he would have died in his hands. The young man in a feather robe was stunned, and then a playful smile appeared on his lips. Yu Linkong? He is just a peerless talent cultivated by a family of sages with a huge amount of cultivation resources. If I were to fight with him, he would also lose. There was a trace of disdain in his words, and he seemed extremely confident. Loka frowned, but did not say anything in the end. The young man in a feather robe was called Shun Baixian, and he came from an ancient family of sages. His family's heritage was even more profound than the Yu clans, and Shun Baixian was regarded as a little monster of the Shun clan. He had a heaven-defying talent, an amazing bloodline, and a domineering and flamboyant temperament. If it were not for the fact that he needed Shun Baishuan's help, Loka would not be willing to come into contact with him. There was no other reason than that this guy was a devil incarnate. Wherever he went, he would cause trouble. He was so fierce that he was a complete mess. And now, he had obviously set his eyes on Demon God Lin, which gave Loka a headache. She knew very well how powerful Demon God Lin was. If Shun Baixian provoked him, there was bound to be a bloody battle. Regardless of the final outcome, the consequences were not what Loka wanted to see. I'm going to the Boundary River to find something. If you have other ideas, then I can only act alone, Locust said indifferently. How can I have other ideas? Shun Baixian smiled. Of course, if we meet Demon God Lin on the way, we can borrow his holy treasure to play with. Loka frowned and finally sighed in his heart. He did not try to persuade Shun Baixian anymore. This guy was so reckless that it was impossible to persuade him. What's more, Loka did not think that they would meet Lin so coincidentally, so he did not refuse to let Shun Baixian go with him. Not long after, the two also set out for the Boundary River. 4 hours after Lin Sun and the others entered the Boundary River, a group of murderous experts suddenly rushed over from the bank of the Boundary River. Each of them had an amazing aura, and they were led by a total of 6 half-step king realm existences. All of a sudden, there was dead silence. Everyone stared with their eyes wide open. They did not know what had happened and why so many experts had appeared. It was obvious that they were from the same force. Have you seen this girl? The leader of the group was an old man with a childish complexion and white hair. He had a gloomy expression on his face as he spoke indifferently. In his hand was a scroll, and on the scroll was a beautiful and charming young girl. Her brows were tightly furrowed and her skin was pale. Chapter 950. Yes, the successor of the Thousand Illusion Dao sect who guarded the Boundary River changed his expression slightly. He realized how terrifying this group of experts was and didn't dare to neglect them. 4 hours ago, this lady entered the Boundary River with a group of explorers. Do you recognize those explorers? The old man asked coldly. Buzz. The man hurriedly took out the Delusion Breaker mirror and rummaged through it. After a while, he finally found the scenes of Lin Sun and his companions being examined. It's them. The old man's gaze swept across Ko Xing, the green-faced assassin, Qi Lian, and Lin Sun, and finally fell on Miss Lu. It's her. The experts near the old man revealed a trace of killing intent, and they seemed to be ready to make a move. Let's go. Immediately, the group rushed towards the Boundary River like a gust of wind. Who are they? They're so scary. It doesn't seem like they're from our west-hung boundary. It's going to be chaotic. The Boundary River is going to change, and it's bound to cause many disturbances here. The discussions in the field were ceaseless, and all the cultivators were surprised and bewildered. The group of people just now were like gods of death that had walked out of hell, and they were filled with terrifying killing intent, especially when there were 6 half-step king realm experts among them. The Boundary River was vast and surging. Storms could be seen everywhere, and space-time turbulence could be seen. Frequent natural disasters wreaked havoc here, and it was an extremely horrifying scene. After entering the Boundary River, Ko Xing took out a dark gray treasured ship and carried everyone forward carefully in the void. The green-faced assassin was guiding the way. Qi Lian led the other explorers to guard different corners of the treasured ship, and they were ready for battle. According to them, after entering the Boundary River, there would be danger at all times, and even experienced experts didn't dare to take it lightly. There were too many strange and ominous things in the Boundary River. The sky was dim, and some places were shattered, turning into terrifying black holes that rotated, and the atmosphere was extremely oppressive. Along the way, they could occasionally see groups of cultivators, but as time went by, the cultivators on the road gradually became fewer and fewer. Suddenly, a strange sound could be heard. It sounded like sobbing and sobbing. Although it was very indistinct, it was very real, as if it came from the end of the world. Ko Xing's expression changed to one of shock as he looked into the distance. A devilish blood-colored meditation cushion had suddenly appeared on the surface of the surging gray river in the distance, and it was floating indeterminately. On the meditation cushion, the figure of a woman that was so close to him was weeping with her head lowered, and her neck had been pierced diagonally by a blood-red sword, causing one to shudder with fear. The others were also shocked. There was a woman weeping on the blood-colored praying mat, her voice mournful. The blood sword had pierced through her neck, yet she seemed to be completely unaware. This scene was a little scary. In just an instant, Ko Xing seemed to have seen something very terrifying. He shouted in a low voice, "Run!" What was that? Lin Sun wanted to ask, But before he opened his mouth, Ko Xing and others had already steered the treasure ship to escape from this area. Rumble. Soon, Lin Sun felt a chill in his heart. In the area where they were just now, the void exploded, the sky collapsed, and the raging river turned into a turbulent whirlpool, engulfing that area. This, Lin Sun was moved. If he had delayed just now, he would have died in an instant. It said that it's the remnant consciousness of a saint who fell here in ancient times. It can't be erased after the erosion of tens of thousands of years. In the border river, as long as you meet this kind of ghost, you must leave immediately, otherwise you are doomed to die here. Chilian, who was nearby, seemed to see Lin Sun's doubts and explained in a low voice. The remnant consciousness of saint. Lin Sun unconsciously thought of the army of ghosts he had seen in the burial sea of Tao in the Soul Oblivion Sea. But in comparison, the remnant consciousness of a saint was undoubtedly more terrible. The treasure ship continued to move forward, and the surrounding atmosphere became more and more oppressive. The world was dim, the river was tumbling, the space and time were flashing in the void, and thunder and lightning and storms were raging constantly. This made Lin Sun feel frightened. If he came here alone, he would never dare to go in rashly. It was no wonder that the border river was called a forbidden area in legends since ancient times, and even the old monsters of the King Realm dared not set foot in it easily. The scene in it was really terrible. According to Chilian, if they wanted to reach the Dongxing territory on the other side, they would have to cross the border river for at least half a month. Moreover, as they went deeper into the border river, the strange and ominous things they encountered would only become more and more terrible and dangerous. The only thing to be thankful for was that Ko Xing and others were all experienced veterans who had entered and exited the border river many times. With them leading the way, they could avoid some fatal dangers. "Boss, look, that white bone mountain has appeared again," one of the explorers exclaimed. In an area far away, the river was tumbling and a mountain of white bones gushed out. There was rolling blood flowing out of the white bone mountain, which was eerie and creepy. No one knew how tall the white bone mountain was. Among the white bones piled up on it, there were flowers of blood. The petals were extremely red, and the flowing blood was pouring out from the pistils of the flowers. The buried spirit mountain, the scarlet purgatory flower. Ko Xing and others were also horrified. They didn't expect that they would encounter such a great danger less than 4 hours after entering the border river. Buried Spirit Mountain was where the souls of ancient experts were buried. On the other hand, the scarlet purgatory flower was an even more terrifying existence. It used the flesh and blood of experts as nourishment. Once one came into contact with it, it was like falling into a blood-colored purgatory, and one's body would be instantly obliterated. Normally speaking, no matter if it was Buried Spirit Mountain or the Scarlet Purgatory Flower, they only existed during the ancient times, and only the most dangerous and bloody places would give birth to such ominous things. But so long as they appeared, it would definitely mean that an ominous calamity would descend. "Let's go. Quickly." Ko Xing's expression was unsightly. He'd originally thought that all the strange and ominous things in the border river would become much quieter after the sudden change in the border river. Never had he imagined that they'd encountered two strange scenes not long after they'd started. First, the Saint Remnant had appeared, and now, Buried Spirit Mountain and the Scarlet Purgatory Flower had appeared. This caused the hearts of Ko Xing and the others to be enveloped by a layer of shadow. If there are great figures of Buddhist cultivators here, then Buried Spirit Mountain and the Scarlet Purgatory Flower are great fortuitous encounters to them. Suddenly, Miss Luce said softly, "It will be of immeasurable benefit to them to hone their dauntless Zen mind and Arhat golden body." A trace of surprise flashed in Lin Sun's black eyes. He keenly noticed that this sickly girl seemed to know many unknown secrets. Ko Xing and the others couldn't care less about this. When they saw such a strange scene, they had already driven the treasure ship to escape with all their strength, fearing that there would be an ominous calamity. Just a moment later, Ko Xing's face changed dramatically and he shouted, "Oh no, get ready to fight." At the same time, Lin Sun spread out his spiritual awareness, but he didn't find any danger at all. Just when he was surprised, he saw that Ko Xing and the others had stopped the treasure ship in the void and looked ahead as if they were facing a formidable enemy. Do you see that? The gray mist is called ominous mist of disaster by us explorers. Once it appears, danger is bound to come, Qilian explained in a low voice. She had a good impression of Lin Sun, so she took good care of him along the way and occasionally gave him some advice on how to seek luck and avoid misfortune in the border river. Lin Sun looked over and saw wisps of gray mist floating out from the raging river in the distance, which was as hazy as smoke and clouds. Lin Sun's heart skipped a beat, and he felt uneasy and cold all over. The mist didn't seem to be threatening, but it revealed a strange aura. Here it comes. Ko Xing's face was solemn. At the same time, Lin Sun also saw a mass of dark clouds emerging silently in the gray mist. Looking carefully, it was not a real dark cloud, but a black moth shaped like a swallowtail butterfly with scarlet eyes and snow-white fangs. Each moth was the size of a palm, with black wings and wisps of gray mist. Just like the devil moths from hell, they looked strange and ferocious. They were numerous, dense, and covered the heavens and the earth. When looked at from afar, they were like a dark and dense layer of clouds that gave others a practically suffocating feeling of oppression. Ghost-winged soul moths. It's them. We're in big trouble. We're doomed this time. All of a sudden, Ko Xing and the other explorers' faces changed dramatically. Their bodies stiffened and their hearts chilled. They were experienced and had heard more than once over the years that wherever ghost-winged soul moths appeared, there would be no chance of survival. Is it terrible? Lin Sun frowned. Unexpectedly, the one who explained was Miss Le. The ghost-winged soul moth is a type of mutated life form from the ancient times. Its body is completely formed from soul power. In other words, ordinary martial arts methods won't work if one wants to kill them. One must use techniques that specifically restrain the soul in order to kill them. They live by devouring the soul fragments of fallen experts. The most terrifying thing about them is that after they devour the soul fragments, the secret techniques, inheritances, and other memories left behind in the soul fragments of experts will be grasped by them. When used in battle, they will erupt with unimaginable might. Lin Sun was shocked. Ghost-winged soul moths were really strange. Then does Miss Le have a way to deal with them? Ko Xing couldn't help asking. I have a string of bells in my hand that should be able to restrain them, but I need you to fight with all your strength to restrain them. Miss Le looked sickly, but at this moment, a wisp of resolute confidence flashed across her clear eyes. All right, we'll fight with all our strength. Ko Xing and the others nodded in agreement without hesitation. Child Lin, it's not safe to stay here for long. You'd better go back to your room and hide. Once the battle starts, I'm afraid we won't be able to take care of you, Qilian said to Lin Sun and advised him to hide. Lin Sun was stunned and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. If other practitioners knew that he, the demon god Lin, was being taken care of like this, what would they think? However, being treated like this by Qilian, Lin Sun was quite touched and enjoyed it. With a solemn expression, he said, "How can I retreat in the face of a great disaster? Don't worry, I won't implicate you." Everyone was in the same boat, and Lin Sun still needed Ko Xing and the others to help him get to Dongxing boundary. At such a time, Lin Sun naturally wouldn't stand idly by. Qilian frowned and was about to say something when a sharp cry suddenly sounded in the distance. The sound was like a sharp blade rubbing against the ground, causing goosebumps to appear on many people's skin and a piercing pain in their souls. There was no doubt that this was a kind of soul attack. Chapter 9:51. In the gray mist in the distance, dense palm-sized ghost-winged soul moths were like black clouds that blotted out the sky, and they pressed down on the void. Sharp hisses reverberated in the world and acted directly on people's souls. They were filled with an astonishing tearing and penetrating force, and they were extremely terrifying. They were wrapped in the gray mist and rushed towards the treasured ship where Lin Sun and the others were. Boom! Ko Xing and the others didn't hesitate to attack, and a series of attacks swept out like a divine rain of light and spread towards the distant void. The momentum was extremely shocking, but the effect was shocking. The ghost-winged soul moths were still rushing over, and no matter how dense and powerful the attacks were, they couldn't stop them at all. Instead, they were easily passed through by them. Only a small part of the ghost-winged soul moths were crushed and turned into powder, but compared to the army of ghost-winged soul moths that blotted out the sky and the earth, the casualties were almost negligible. This was absolutely a terrible and depressing thing. These damn things were too strange, and ordinary combat methods were completely ineffective against them. These are the ghost-winged soul moths. Their bodies are formed by soul power, and they survive by devouring the soul fragments of powerhouses. Be careful, Miss Lu reminded. As she spoke, she turned her white hand, and a string of 9 bells appeared in the palm of her hand. Each of them seemed to be polished from purple glass, and their surface was carved with ancient patterns of flowers, birds, insects, fish, mountains, rivers, earth, and latitude. The 9 bells were strung together by a mottled red string with scorch marks. As soon as they appeared, they emitted a melodious, tinkling sound that drifted between the heaven and the earth. Whoosh! One could clearly see circles of resplendent purple sound waves spreading out, transforming into tens of thousands of sword shadows in the void, whistling out in a dense manner. Every sword shadow showed a kind of magnificent purple color, and they were peerlessly fierce and coiled with the power of Tao insight. They were completely derived from pure sound waves. At this moment, thousands of sword shadows flashed out together like thousands of swords bursting out. The scene was extremely spectacular, and it had a kind of shocking power. Boom! In an instant, numerous holes were instantly pierced through the army of ghost-winged soul moths that were like black clouds that covered the heavens and the earth, and countless ghost-winged soul moths were annihilated on the spot before their bodies exploded into pieces and transformed into gray mist that dispersed into the surroundings. Ko Xing and the others were stunned, and they were shocked in their hearts. A string of glistening violet bells actually emanated such terrifying lethality, and this had completely exceeded their imagination. Even Lin Sun was surprised at this moment. Then, he realized that the string of bells in Miss Li's hand was definitely a set of musical treasures. It might even be a set of divine weapons. Divine weapons were forged from divine materials and controlled by the energy of one's soul. They possessed unfathomable might, and they were even rarer and more precious than imperial weapons. Interesting. This Miss Li's background is probably extraordinary. However, for some unknown reason, she needs to cross the boundary river to head to the East Victory World. Lin Sun was lost in thought. Hualala, the purple bells collided with each other, making a sweet tinkling sound. Circles of sound ripples spread out, or evolved into substantial sword chi, or turned into magical secret attacks. Although the lethality was amazing, the number of ghost-winged soul moths was too large. They were like dark clouds, covering the sky and the earth, as if they could never be killed. Ko Xing and the other explorers dared not neglect and attacked with all their strength. They all knew that once they couldn't stop the attack of the ghost-winged soul moths, they were doomed to be wiped out this time. Something's wrong. Lin Sun was about to attack when he suddenly noticed something wrong. In the depths of the army of ghost-winged soul moths, there was an extremely terrible breath, which seemed to be in control of everything like a king. Although the other party hid extremely secretly, Lin Sun was still able to locate it under the coverage of his huge spiritual awareness. Sure enough, at the same time when Lin Sun found this scene, in the depths of the army of ghost-winged soul moths, a resounding roar suddenly sounded, shaking the void in this area violently. The power of this sound wave alone was enough to shock a large number of masters to death. Fortunately, the treasure ship had the protection of Miss Li's purple bells. The spreading purple sound wave effectively dissolved the impact, so that Ko Xing and the other explorers were not injured. Be careful, everyone. There's a Moth King here. Miss Lu also discovered it, and her face suddenly became extremely serious. In the depths of the army of ghost-winged soul moths in the distance, a silver creature appeared. Its eyes were as bright as blood diamonds, emitting a demonic and frightening luster. Through the gray mist, it swept towards the treasure ship. It was very terrifying. Although it was only the size of a palm, the aura it emitted was like that of a real king. Its wings flapped, spreading silver, soul-power sound waves, and clashed with the power of the purple bells in Miss Lee's hand. Whoosh! Miss Lee's figure flashed and rose into the sky. A string of purple bells was controlled by her with all her strength, causing her entire body to be coiled in shimmering purple divine radiance. She had no choice but to fight the Moth King, otherwise, everyone on the treasure ship was bound to suffer. Everyone, the situation is dangerous. We must fight with all our might. As for success or failure, it all depends on the will of the heavens. Miss Lu sighed lightly. The expressions of Ko Xing and the others were heavy to the extreme. This was a great calamity, and it even caused them to feel despair. If they fought with all they had, then perhaps they could obtain a trace of hope for survival. But if they didn't, then they would die for sure. Rumble! In merely a short moment, the ghost-winged soul moths charged over like a tide and charged onto the treasure ship. It was also at this moment that Ko Xing and the others realized how terrifying these ancient variant beings were. All of them were extremely ferocious and fearless, and they directly attacked one's soul. They lived by devouring the soul fragments of fallen experts, and the memories and inheritances contained within the soul fragments would be refined and grasped by them, causing them to be extremely terrifying. It would be easy to deal with if there were merely 2 or 3 of them. But now, they surged over like a tide, and they were simply like locusts, causing them to feel despair. Screams rang out. The defense of the treasure ship was broken. No matter how a female strongman resisted, she was instantly covered by a swarm of ghost-winged soul moths. In just a moment, there was only a complete corpse left on the ground, and her soul had already been devoured. This made Ko Xing and the others so angry that their eyes almost popped out of their sockets. The female strongman was not weak, with the cultivation of Tao Insight Realm. But at the moment of contact, she died. Everyone be careful. You must protect your soul, Chilean shouted, reminding others that the reason why the female strongman died just now was that her soul was attacked, which made her react a bit slower. Lin Sun originally wanted to rescue her, but it was too late because there were too many ghost-winged soul moths. They came from all directions, and even he was besieged. These damned things. Lin Sun ran the meditating magic. No matter how many kinds of soul attacks hit him, they couldn't hurt him at all. Moreover, when he used the ultimacy of Paleo's roar and ran in his fist, he immediately received an incredible effect. Groups of ghost-winged soul moths died in an instant. No, not far from Lin Sun, a man screamed in horror. He was dodging crazily, and he was about to die. Swish! A snow-white broken blade flashed and strangled all the ghost-winged soul moths around the man. Escaping from death made the man feel relieved and grateful. But before he could thank Lin Sun had already rushed to the other side. Boom! On the treasure ship, the ghost-winged soul moths hissed and launched an all-out attack. The situation was extremely critical, which made Ko Xing and the others in a precarious situation, because these ancient mutants were really strange. They were completely transformed by soul power, and ordinary fighting means couldn't kill them at all. Although the soul power of Ko Xing and the others was not bad, they lacked the method of soul fighting, which made them fall into a passive position as soon as the battle started. Kill! Lin Sun's killing intent was aroused. He moved on the treasure ship with ice drake steps. Wherever he passed, groups of ghost-winged soul moths were killed like paper. They couldn't stop him at all. At the same time, the broken blade flashed and was controlled by Lin Sun's soul to save Ko Xing and the others. Lin Sun couldn't tolerate Ko Xing and the others being killed. He still needed Ko Xing and the others to guide him to the Dongxing boundary on the other side. Soon, Ko Xing and the others were shocked. Only then did they realize that the spiritual celestial master named Lin Xia, who followed them this time, was showing great power at this moment. He killed his opponents with irresistible force, as if he was in an unstoppable state. This kid is actually a hidden master. Qi Lian's charming peach blossom eyes flashed with a trace of surprise. Good, some explorers shouted. In this short period of time, Lin Sun had saved many of them, which made them excited and surprised. However, Lin Sun's action was like poking a hornet's nest. Many ghost-winged soul moths nearby began to gather, and then rushed towards Lin Sun together to end his life. Boom! Lin Sun stretched out his hand and clapped. A sea of fire spread out, and burning stars exploded one after another, turning into the profound power of Paleo's roar. This was the combination of fire refining star river method and Paleo's roar. In the void, where the sea of fire spread out, hundreds and thousands of ghost-winged soul moths were incinerated in an instant and disappeared. The lethality was astonishing. To others, the soul attack might be extremely terrifying, but to Lin Sun, whose soul power had already reached the level of divine flower gathering, it was no threat at all. Whether it was Paleo's roar or the broken blade, they were both natural restraints on these ancient creatures formed by soul power. Under such circumstances, Lin Sun was like a sharp knife, invincible and unparalleled. His strength was in a mess. Ko Xing and the others had long been shocked speechless. How was this a spiritual, celestial master proficient in probing acupoints? He was clearly a peerless master. Previously, they had all underestimated this young man named Lin Xia. At this moment, even Miss Lu, who was fighting with the Moth King, couldn't help but show a hint of surprise. But soon, she didn't have time to think too much. The power of the Moth King was too terrifying, making her feel incomparably pressured. She didn't dare to be distracted. At the same time, Lin Sun, who was charging forward, frowned imperceptibly. This won't do. There are too many of these things. It's impossible to kill them all in a short time. This isn't the way. Thinking of this, he looked at the Moth King who was fighting with Miss Lu in the distant void. Chapter 952. The Moth King's whole body was silver, which made it look different from the others. It had the majesty of a king. Moreover, it mastered the secret method of divine soul. The sound wave attack it released could evolve into different magical powers, which was extremely amazing. If it weren't for the string of purple bells in Miss Li's hand, which specialized in restraining this kind of divine soul power, she would have been defeated long ago. Even so, her situation at the moment was not very optimistic. The power of the Moth King was too terrible. The sound wave was like a tide, covering the sky and the earth. There was silver brilliance everywhere, shattering the void in this area. It's up to you. If you can seize it, it will be enough to let you advance to the next stage. This is a rare opportunity, Lin Sun said in his heart. At the same time, the spirit-eating bugs that Lin Sun had nurtured in his sea of consciousness with the secluded starbug mastery woke up from their deep sleep. Hearing Lin Sun's order, these rice grain-sized spirit-eating bugs became extremely excited and cheered. Whoosh! Whoosh! In an instant, they rushed out silently through the void and rushed to the Moth King, who was fighting with Miss Lu in the distance. At this moment, Lin Sun covered the spirit-eating bugs with his spiritual awareness. He keenly noticed that the Moth King seemed to be startled and let out a sharp hissing. Spirit-eating bugs. Damn it! You have already died. An obscure roar spread from the Moth King, which could only be heard by the spirit-eating bugs. It seemed to be extremely afraid. It abandoned Miss Lu without hesitation, flapped its silver wings, and fled. This caused Miss Lu to be stunned and confused. At the same time, Lin Sun was also a little surprised. He didn't expect that the spirit-eating insect, which was only in the first stage and was just a larva, could make the Moth King so afraid that it fled before the fight started. Obviously, the spirit-eating bugs were the natural enemies of the ghost-winged soul moths. Lin Sun ignored this and let the 9 spirit-eating bugs chase after the Moth King, while he continued to kill other ghost-winged soul moths. At this time, the situation on the field had obviously begun to change. With the escape of the Moth King, The overwhelming army of ghost-winged soul moths began to become chaotic, as if an army had lost control. This suddenly relieved a lot of pressure on Ko Xing and others. They were also surprised. What happened to the aggressive army of ghost-winged soul moths? Crash. At this moment, Miss Lu had already returned to the treasure ship. She used the purple bell to help Lin Sun and the others kill the ghost-winged soul moths. In this way, the ghost-winged soul moth army began to show signs of collapse, and their lives were harvested in droves. Ko Xing and the other explorers cheered excitedly. They'd originally felt hopeless, yet never had they imagined that the situation would actually turn around and allow them to see the hope of survival. Lin Sun also breathed a sigh of relief and murmured in his heart that if he had known this, he would have sent spirit-eating bugs to kill the Moth King directly. At the same time, Miss Li's dignified look eased a lot. She glanced thoughtfully at Lin Sun, who was not far away, and then suddenly murmured, "I didn't expect that there would be spirit-devouring insects in this world. Thanks to them, I was saved from danger this time. You also know spirit-eating insects?" Lin Sun was a little surprised. These are the top 10 exotic insects in the ancient times. They once devoured the souls of real saints. They're extremely terrifying. How could I not know about them? Miss Lu said softly. However, as far as I know, spirit-eating insects are the guardian insects of the ancient star and nether imperial clan. They were annihilated long ago in the ancient times. I never thought that I'd see them again today. Lin Sun was shocked. This seemingly sickly girl obviously knew a lot of secrets. She even knew about the star and nether imperial clan, which seemed too unusual. What was her identity? "Child, may I ask if these spirit-eating insects are raised by you?" Suddenly, Miss Li's voice sounded in Lin Sun's ears. Yes. Lin Sun was calm. He knew that these things couldn't be hidden from Miss Li's eyes at all. Hiding it would instead make her suspicious of him. I see. Miss Li nodded and didn't probe further. She was very smart and could tell at a glance that Lin Sun didn't want to talk about this issue. "Child, these insects are extremely ferocious. If you don't raise them properly, it's extremely easy for you to suffer backlash. Please be careful," she reminded him. From this, it could be seen that Miss Lu might not have seen spirit-eating insects before, but she knew them like the back of her hand. "Thank you." Lin Sun was even more certain that this woman had an extraordinary background. Seeing Lin Sun being so calm, Miss Lu was startled. She seemed to realize something and laughed at herself. "It seems that I've worried too much. Child seems to have an extraordinary relationship with the Star and Nether Imperial clan. You've already mastered the method of raising these insects." Lin Sun didn't expect that Miss Li's insight would be so sharp. He didn't say much, but she had already guessed some things. But until now, he couldn't figure out this woman's background at all. This inevitably made Lin Sun a little wary. "Child, although we didn't have much interaction in the past, we're in the same boat now. This is fate. I don't have any malice towards Child, so I hope Child doesn't worry about anything." It had to be said that Miss Lu was absolutely intelligent. She seemed to have seen through Lin Sun's thoughts and couldn't help but explain to him via voice transmission. She seemed very sincere. "After we resolve this danger, I'll be happy to have a chat with Child." Lin Sun smiled and nodded in agreement. She was very honest, but Lin Sun had to admit that she was definitely the most intelligent woman he had ever seen. After a quarter of an hour, the battle came to an end. In the end, the leaderless army of ghost-winged soul moths collapsed and disappeared into the depths of the vast river. Ko Xing, green-faced assassin, and Qi Lian were all relieved. They felt a sense of joy after surviving a disaster. Although their bodies didn't suffer any injuries in this battle, their souls were impacted and they were more or less injured. In addition, 2 of their companions had unfortunately died. This was something that couldn't be helped. The situation just now was too dangerous, and casualties were inevitable. In fact, if it weren't for Lin Sun and Miss Lu, they would all have suffered. It's all thanks to your help that we were able to avert danger this time. We won't dare to forget this life-saving grace. Ko Xing cupped his hands and thanked them gratefully. The others did the same, especially the way they looked at Lin Sun, which was completely different from before. In the previous battle, Lin Sun's unstoppable and invincible posture had caused a great shock and impact to them. They were all ruthless stubble who lived on the edge of a knife all year round and had rich experience. They knew very well that Lin Sun was definitely not as simple as a spiritual celestial master, but they didn't expose or ask. They understood that Lin Sun might have hidden reasons for hiding his identity. Since that was the case, it was obviously inappropriate for them to ask further. "Child, would you like to have a drink with me now?" Not long after, Miss Lu invited Lin Sun. "My pleasure," Lin Sun agreed with a smile. He was also very curious about what kind of person this girl was. Immediately, the two entered a room in the treasure ship. Seeing this, Ko Xing and the others sensibly went to do their own business. Although the threat brought by the ghost-winged soul moth had been resolved, no one dared to be careless on this extremely dangerous border river. And as they went deeper, the dangers they encountered along the way would only become more and more terrifying. Hundreds of miles away from the treasure ship, the river was surging and gray mist was rising, drowning the heaven and earth, appearing strange and horrifying. In the depths of the gray mist, a pile of white bones in the shape of a beehive emerged. At this moment, an incomparably shrill cry resounded from the pile of white bones. It was a moth king with silver wings, but at this moment, it was firmly stuck by 9 spirit-eating bugs, who were nibbling its body bit by bit. In the process, no matter how it struggled, it couldn't get rid of them. It seemed violent, frightened, desperate, and helpless. In just a moment, the Moth King was eaten up completely. The 9 spirit-eating bugs were glowing, their rice grain-like bodies flowing with strange black brilliance. Then their bodies actually cracked inch by inch. Crack! Crack! In the end, they underwent a metamorphosis, shedding their original bodies and turning into a kind of silvery white color. They were smaller than before, as inconspicuous as sesame seeds. But looking carefully, their bodies could be said to be perfect, flowing with a strange, silvery white luster, giving people a sense of holiness. This was the second stage of the spirit-eating bug's evolution. At this stage, the spirit-eating bug was like being reborn from fire, and it was enough to easily devour the divine soul of a great practitioner at the reincarnation development stage. Moreover, if it was unexpected, even a half step to the king realm would be at a disadvantage. However, when the metamorphosis was completed, an even more shocking scene happened. One of the spirit-eating bugs suddenly flashed to its companion on the side, and in a strong and overbearing manner, it instantly devoured the companion. Almost at the same time, the other spirit-eating bugs were restless, as if they felt uneasy and wanted to escape. But after the spirit-eating bug that launched the attack first let out a strange cry, the other spirit-eating bugs seemed to have accepted their fate, crouching there and daring not to move. Then, the spirit-eating bugs were devoured one by one. And finally, there was only one spirit-eating bug left. It was still the size of sesame seed, and it didn't seem to have changed much, but the color of its body became much deeper and more restrained, like a silver cold metal. There was more indescribable majesty all over its body, like a young bug king, showing its loftiness for the first time. It stood in the void, as if hesitating about something and pacing back and forth. Almost at the same time, Lin Sun, who had just sat in a room and was about to talk with Miss Lu, looked gloomy. At this time, there was a sudden fluctuation in his sea of consciousness, which made him instantly understand what happened to the 9 spirit-eating bugs. "Come back." He gave an order with his divine awareness in a tough manner. The spirit-eating bug hesitated, seeming to be a little impatient and unable to make a decision. Chapter 953. Lin Sun's voice was inviolable. In fact, he was not as calm as he looked. He didn't expect that after swallowing a Moth King, the 9 spirit-eating bugs had more than one metamorphosis. And by chance, a special spirit-eating bug with the potential to become a king was cultivated. According to the secluded star insect mastery, the probability of this happening was extremely rare, and it was 1 in 10,000 in ancient times. This special spirit-eating bug, also known as larval king bug, generally only appeared when the spirit-eating bugs evolved to the third stage. The larval king bug was extremely domineering and unique. When it was born, it would swallow all other spirit-eating bugs and refine them into its own potential. Moreover, it had begun to awaken its independent consciousness. Like a crown prince, it had its own dignity and pride and was extremely resistant to being raised and used by others. In ancient times, there had been cases of larval king bugs rebelling against its owner. Lin Sun was not worried at first, because the secluded star insect mastery recorded a special method to control and use larval king bugs. But Lin Sun never thought that before he had time to prepare, a larval king bug was born among those spirit-eating bugs when he just advanced to the second stage. This surprised Lin Sun and made him a little unprepared. He couldn't help but feel nervous. It was not easy for him to raise a larval king bug. If he let it slip away, all his efforts would be wasted. Buzz, the spirit-eating bug, became more and more impatient, and its sesame-sized, dark silver body emitted circles of obscure fluctuations. Then, a childish voice resounded in Lin Sun's sea of consciousness. "Master, I am not ungrateful. I will repay your kindness in the future. Now, I have awakened the potential to become a king, and I should find the way to become a king by myself instead of betraying you." "Nonsense," Lin Sun disdained. "You are just an ungrateful wolf after all. Master, I prefer death to humiliation. How can you desecrate my dignity with an ungrateful wolf?" The spirit-eating bug was indignant and expressed its protest. Lin Sun was in a trance and instantly realized that this was an extremely proud guy. It didn't want to eat for free with him, so it planned to leave alone. And this little guy attached great importance to dignity and reputation, which could not be desecrated. Little Silver. Suddenly, Lin Sun let out a sigh. "Speaking of which, I've suffered a lot to get you here. I'm very reluctant and don't understand why you want to leave. You have to be considerate." "Little Silver? Master, this name is too." The God-Eater bug felt a chill run down its spine, and it seemed to be slightly unable to accept it. "Don't interrupt. Listen to me first." Lin Sun frowned and then sighed. "It's fine if you want to leave, but don't come back in the future. From now on, you and I will break off all ties and have no contact with each other. I will fulfill your wish and fulfill your dream of becoming a king." "Master." The spirit-eating bug was very conflicted and hesitant. Lin Sun sighed. "Let's go. You don't have to feel guilty or indebted." The spirit-eating bug was speechless. "I could not feel guilty. Master, The spirit-eating bug took a deep breath and was about to make a decision. But Lin Sun had already said first, "It's still early, and you don't have to make a decision in a hurry. You just finished your transformation. Why are you in a hurry to leave now? Why don't you stay and think about this problem first? It's not too late to make a decision when you've completely figured it out." His words were sincere and gentle, like the attentive and meticulous exhortations of an elder. The spirit-eating bug was stunned and a little confused. It didn't know what Lin Sun was up to. What he said was too confusing. "Master, then." The spirit-eating bug felt that its head was tangled into a ball, and its newly awakened consciousness became confused. "Little Silver, stay here first. When you think it over, I will give you the freedom you want," Lin Sun said with hope in his tone. "Okay." In the end, the spirit-eating bug gritted its teeth and agreed. Lin Sun was delighted. Before he spoke, the spirit-eating bug made a request with awe-inspiring righteousness. "I have a condition." "Say it. Don't call me Little Silver anymore." The spirit-eating bug said one word at a time. "What a terrible name." Lin Sun was stunned and couldn't help but say, "Of course, no problem." At the same time, Lin Sun withdrew his divine senses. Only then did he notice that Miss Lu, who was sitting opposite him and pouring wine, was staring at him with a strange expression, as if she was staring at a fool. Lin Sun's old face was a little hot. He realized that he had been coaxing and pestering to make the spirit-eating bug stay. But he had forgotten that Miss Lu had seen every change in his expression just now. "Sorry, I have something urgent to deal with. How about we talk another day?" Lin Sun said as he got up. He didn't have time to explain. "Okay." Miss Lu looked very understanding. However, as soon as Lin Sun walked out of the room, he heard Miss Li's long-suppressed laughter behind him. Lin Sun felt more and more embarrassed. It was conceivable that the change in his expression just now must have left a very deep impression on Miss Lu. How embarrassing. It was all Little Silver's fault. Lin Sun was so angry that he secretly ground his teeth. Master, why did you imprison me here? Little Silver was very confused. As soon as he returned, Lin Sun had directly locked him into his sea of consciousness and suppressed him with a secluded starbug mastery. Lin Sun smiled and said patiently, "Don't you think it's easier to think about things calmly this way? For example, whether you stay or leave. But why do I feel like I'm imprisoned?" Little Silver said in a daze. Lin Sun sighed in his heart. This silly child was simply dim-witted. He still hadn't realized what was going on and was still clamoring to wander the world alone in search of Tao. Given his intelligence, he would be lucky not to be tricked to death. Little Silver, I'm doing this for your own good. When you understand my good intentions, I won't worry about you anymore even if you leave. Lin Sun behaved like a teacher who was teaching Little Silver. Master, Little Silver was furious. You promised not to call me that disgusting name again. How dare you go back on your word? You want to change your name? That's easy. When you understand, you can call me whatever you want. Lin Sun smiled very gently and amiably. Little Silver was silent. He seemed to realize that something was wrong with the situation. After a long time, he shouted, "Master, you've been lying to me from the beginning, haven't you?" However, no one responded to it. Lin Sun had decided to give this little guy a good lesson and kill his arrogance, so that he wouldn't want to wander the world alone in the future like a simple-minded, dim-witted person. How embarrassing would it be if he was tricked? Master, you're too despicable, black-hearted, hypocritical, and shameless. Little Silver finally reacted and flew into a rage. As a spirit-eating insect with the potential to become a king, he naturally wasn't stupid. It was just that he hadn't experienced the treachery of the human heart, so his reaction was very slow. Just you wait. If I get out, I'll make you regret it. It's no use apologizing. Little Silver shouted. No one responded. I've never seen such a shameless person. Still no one responded. Little Silver was about to go crazy. He felt hurt. He had trusted his master so much, but the other party was so shameless and despicable. In order to keep him here, he had deceived him without leaving a trace. This was simply too shameless. Little Silver was an extremely proud, spirit-eating insect who valued dignity and glory very much. Being deceived like this made him so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. He had never thought that he would actually run into such a black-hearted master who didn't play by the rules. It was outrageous and deserving of disdain. You're just a child. I'm doing this for your own good. This was Lin Sun's idea. He decided to leave this little guy alone for a few days to calm down and reflect. In any case, Lin Sun was very happy and relaxed that he had successfully kept Little Silver here. He decided to have a chat with Miss Lu. Miss Lu didn't seem surprised that Lin Sun returned not long after he left. She sat there and reached out her hand to pick up a plain jade wine pot. She filled the glass cup on the table to the brim and asked with a smile, "Did something happen to the spirit-eating insects?" The fragrance of the wine, with a hint of a unique sweet smell, filled the room. Although Miss Li's aura was weak and sickly, her every movement, every frown, and every smile had a kind of elegant and leisurely taste that was pleasing to the eye. Lin Sun said in surprise, "Miss Li's eyes are like torches. Nothing can be hidden from you." Miss Lu raised her glass and clinked it with Lin Sun's. Then she took a sip of the amber-colored, crystal-clear wine and said with a smile, "Child, you flatter me. I just happen to know something about spirit-eating insects and know that it's not easy to raise this kind of ancient, strange insect." After some small talk, Miss Lu said frankly before Lin Sun could probe, "Child, you must be curious why I crossed the boundary river to go to Dongxing territory. It's very simple. I'm taking refuge. If nothing goes wrong, my pursuers will catch up with me soon." Lin Sun said, "I see." He had already guessed it, so it wasn't strange. What I can tell you now is that I come from a sacred hermitage in Dongxing territory, and my pursuers are from an ancient country in Dongxing territory. Miss Li's clear eyes were calm, and there was a hint of seriousness in her voice. She looked at Lin Sun and said, "That is to say, although I'm in the same boat as you, I don't have any hostility towards you, so you don't have to be vigilant against me." Speaking of this, she laughed at herself and said, "What's more, with my current weak state, it's impossible for me to harm you." The sacred hermitage. Lin Sun was shocked. This was the first person from the sacred hermitage that he had seen since he entered the ancient desolation realm. Previously, he had only heard of Xing Jinzi, the successor of the Dachin Lin Temple in the sacred hermitage, who is also known as the Little Western Paradise. "Miss Lu, pardon me for asking, but you seem to be very worried that I will have some kind of misunderstanding towards you," Lin Sun said thoughtfully with a smile on his lips and a calm expression. Chapter 954. Miss Lu met Lin Sun's gaze and nodded calmly, "Yes." "Why?" Lin Sun was puzzled. Miss Lu smiled, revealing her sparkling teeth as her cherry lips curled into a meaningful arc. "If I'm not wrong, young master is probably in the same situation as me. Due to some kind of interference, he had no choice but to cross the boundary river." Lin Sun narrowed his eyes and smiled. "That's right." Speaking of this, Miss Lu raised her glass again and clinked it with Lin Sun's before draining it in one gulp. Her pale and beautiful face was flushed, adding to her beauty. Her clear eyes flickered as she said, "We're both in the same boat. I don't want to have any unnecessary misunderstandings with you." Lin Sun sighed with emotion. "Miss Lu is so intelligent and meticulous. I can't help but admire you." He already suspected that Miss Lu had already guessed his identity, but since she didn't expose him, he was happy about it. Miss Lu sat upright and still, exuding an elegant temperament. She said, "To be honest, I have some selfish motives in talking to you this time. I hope to cooperate with you." "Cooperation?" "Yes. You already know that I'm being hunted. Ko Xing and the others are far from being a match for the enemy," Miss Lu said. "So, I'd like to ask for your help." Lin Sun was speechless. "Don't think too highly of me, Miss Lu." Miss Lu gazed at Lin Sun with her clear eyes. "You don't have to be modest. There may be many people in this world who underestimate you, but I'm definitely not one of them. On the contrary, in my opinion, with your ability, you can make a name for yourself even in Dongsheng domain." Lin Sun was stunned and thought that this woman had probably already seen through his identity. Otherwise, how could she speak so confidently? "Of course, we've met by chance, and this is our first cooperation. As a gesture of sincerity, I'm willing to give you this. I believe you'll like it." As Miss Lu spoke, an object appeared in her fair and long right palm. It was a token shaped like a flying sword. It was simple in shape and engraved with complicated Taoist patterns, exuding an aura of age. "This is?" Lin Sun discerned with a single glance that this object was extraordinary. It was extremely ancient, and it ought to have existed for a very long time. Moreover, it was actually inscribed with true markings of the Grand Tao, and this was too rare and precious. Could it be that young master has never heard of the Great Tao Hidden King token? Miss Lu seemed slightly surprised. Lin Sun shook his head. He really didn't know this thing. Miss Lu pondered for a moment and seemed to be relieved. She said, "In ancient times, there was an extremely glorious period. At that time, the world was at peace, Tao techniques flourished, thousands of races stood tall, and hundreds of schools of thought contended. That period of time can similarly be called a great era. Extraordinary geniuses and geniuses from all over the universe emerged like carps in a river, and they vied for beauty. The Prodigy Gold ranking that caused all the heroes in the world to vie for the top spot was born at that time. Everyone in the world knows that only those experts who are truly ranked on the Prodigy Gold rankings can be called true prodigies. As for the other so-called prodigies, they will be eliminated in the end." Lin Sun listened carefully. He knew that since Miss Lu said so, it meant that the Great Tao Hidden King token she mentioned should be related to the Battle of the Great Era, or even the Prodigy Gold rankings. Sure enough, Miss Lu said in the next moment, "At that time, the Prodigy Gold rankings had such a great influence that it could even affect the future and structure of the entire younger generation. Even the orthodoxies in the Saint Hermit grounds couldn't sit still. Then, the great Tao Hidden King token was born. Lin Sun was stunned. This turn of events was so fast that he couldn't react for a while. However, Miss Lu explained, the great Tao Hidden King token is a means to recruit talented disciples for one's orthodoxies. Anyone who can be ranked on the Prodigy Gold rankings will have the opportunity to enter one of the orthodoxies in the Saint Hermit grounds to cultivate with this token. Lin Sun finally understood, and he couldn't help but be surprised. The Saint Hermit grounds was the most mysterious place in the world. It didn't just refer to a certain place, but was a general term for those orthodoxies that had retired from the secular world. What was the Saint Hermit grounds? It was the unworldly place where sages lived in seclusion. Such forces were even more mysterious and transcendent than the ancient orthodoxies that were known in the world, and their resources were the most terrifying as well. All of them had survived since ancient times. For example, the Diana Forest Temple, which was known as the Mini Western Paradise, was an extremely mysterious ancient pure land of Buddhism in the Saint Hermit grounds. Not to mention mortals of the mortal world. Even cultivators would practically be unable to see such a sect if they didn't have the guidance of others. It was like a sect that stood towering above the heavens, and it was extraordinary and extremely mysterious. Of course, ancient orthodoxies like the Heart Inquisition Sword House and the Heavenly Sword Sect might not be inferior to the Saint Hermit grounds. This was like the difference between the light and the dark. One stood towering in the world and deterred the world, while the other lived in seclusion and possessed a lofty status that was worthy of admiration. Perhaps the only difference was that there were numerous ancient orthodoxies in the world, and it was inevitable that good and bad were intermingled. They came in all shapes and forms, and their resources varied greatly as well. However, the Saint Hermit ground were different. Any orthodoxy there was not inferior to the top orthodoxies in the world. This was just Lin Sun's superficial knowledge. As for how many Saint Hermit grounds there were in the ancient Desolation realm, and how many ancient orthodoxies there were, Lin Sun knew nothing about them. However, Lin Sun was still a little surprised when he heard that as long as one was ranked on the Tianjiao Golden List, he would have the opportunity to cultivate in one of the orthodoxies in the Saint Hermit grounds with the Great Way Hidden King token. As far as he knew, the Saint Hermit grounds never accepted disciples from the outside world. Almost all of their disciples were creatures that grew up in the Saint Hermit grounds. After a short period of digesting, Lin Sun could not help but sigh with emotion. I didn't expect that the Saint Hermit grounds would have such harsh conditions to recruit disciples. Miss Lu smiled and said, the more ancient an orthodoxy is, the harsher it is to recruit disciples. As the saying goes, don't leak the Tao and don't impart the Dharma easily. For example, the Tao orthodoxy that I'm from has to undergo numerous strict selections and tests when passing down the mantle. There are tests that target one's character, disposition, nature, comprehension ability, natural talent, bloodline, and intelligence. There's even no lack of other tests. In short, if you want to get a powerful inheritance, you need to have the ability to match it. Lin Sun gasped. That is to say, the disciples who can get the inheritance in this way are more abnormal than the others, right? Abnormal? Miss Lu smiled and nodded. That's right. I've seen a true heavenly son. He's a descendant of the Bai Fong clan. The moment he was born, he caused a phenomenon in the heavens and earth and grasped rare innate powers. I've also seen spirits and freaks that were born in the world and nurtured by nature. Their talents and knowledge are enough to make most of the heavenly talents in the world feel desperate. Lin Sun was speechless for a while. There was always someone better in the world. Do you feel like you've suffered a great blow? Miss Lu blinked her eyes and said with a smile, I've grown up in such an environment since I was a child. I'm used to it. If Yu Ling Kong is in the Saint Hermit place, what kind of person is he? Lin Sun suddenly asked. He was really curious. Miss Lu took a deep look at Lin Sun as if she had expected him to ask this question. She said, Yu Kong was born in a family of sages and apprenticed to the pure land of longevity. His resources and talent are top-notch, even in the Saint Hermit place. After a pause, she changed the topic and said, "However, there are many people like him in every Saint Hermit place. He's not rare. Of course, compared with most of the other descendants, Yu Kong is already top-notch. It depends on who he is compared with." When she spoke up to hear, Miss Lu frowned and deliberated before she said, "Actually, my understanding is very superficial. Every single Saint Hermit area in this world possesses a terrifying reserve that's unknown to others. But there's one thing I'm sure of. The Saint Hermit areas have existed since the ancient times, and they're able to stand towering until now after experiencing the passage of time. So, their reserves are so deep that they absolutely can't be underestimated. The Saint Hermit place really deserves its reputation." Lin Sun sighed with emotion. Listening to a wise man's words was better than reading books for 10 years. He had never learned about these secrets before. "Child, in my opinion, your resources are not inferior to anyone in the world. The only thing you lack is this thing." Miss Lu held up the Great Law Hidden King token in her hand and said in a calm and serious tone, "With this token, child has the opportunity to enter a certain orthodoxy in the Saint Hermit place to cultivate. In this way, even if you offend some forces in the future, you won't have to worry about being unscrupulously retaliated against." Linson understood that Miss Lu said so much. In fact, it was nothing more than an opportunity to explain that with the Great Law Hidden King token, he would have a chance to seek a strong backer for himself. Of course, it was just an opportunity. Whether he could seize it or not depended on whether he could fight for it. This gift really made Lin Sun quite excited. Before, he was chased everywhere in the West Hung world and targeted by many ancient orthodoxies. Why? The reason for this was because he was all alone and had no one to rely on. Moreover, he didn't have any backing, and that was the reason why he was so unbridledly suppressed by his opponents. If he could enter a certain orthodoxy in the Saint Hermit place, his identity would change. He would no longer be alone. Anyone who wanted to target him in the future would have to think about the consequences of offending the orthodoxy behind him. The Great Law Hidden King token was an opportunity to change his identity and rely on a strong backer. Miss Lu probably saw this point, so she took out this thing as a gift. It could be said that she was very sincere. If it were any other practitioner, they would not refuse it. Lin Sun was also thinking. He couldn't help but be tempted. But he also understood that once he accepted this kind of sincerity, it was very likely to affect his future cultivation path and even change the trajectory of his future cultivation. Therefore, he had to consider it carefully. P.S. The following words are free of charge. The content of this chapter is very simple, but every sentence and paragraph is very difficult to write. It takes a lot of time and energy. I don't like to write this kind of plot the most, but for the development of the plot in the future, I must make a detailed foreshadowing. The Saint Hermit place, the Tianjiao Golden List, and Lin Sun's future cultivation path all need a careful arrangement. I also hope that the readers don't think it is too plain. The story has ups and downs, so it has a soul-stirring charm. Chapter 955. The Realm River bobbed up and down as turbid waves surged into the sky. The treasure ship shuttled through it like a fish struggling to swim in the raging waves. Ko Xing and company were experienced. Although the journey was fraught with danger, it did not pose a problem for them. They managed to avoid danger after danger. In the room, Miss Lu sat upright and still. She poured wine and sipped by herself as she waited calmly. The Great Way Hidden King token was extremely tempting to every peerless elite in the world. If they could grasp the opportunity, they could enter a certain orthodoxy in the Saint Hermit grounds to cultivate. This was no less than a carp leaping through the dragon's gate. From then on, they could fly as high as they wanted. Their identity, status, and even the path of cultivation would undergo earth-shattering changes. However, to Miss Li's surprise, Lin Sun shook his head after a long while. "I can't accept this." "Why?" Miss Lu was taken aback. Lin Sun answered truthfully, This item is of great importance. It's difficult for me to make a decision at the moment. That's understandable. Miss Lu pondered for a moment before saying with a smile. However, you don't have to reject it first. We'll only know if it's of use in the future. With that said, she handed the token to Lin's son. Young master, please don't reject it again. Just treat it as making a friend. Lin's son drank a cup of wine and said with a carefree smile, All right, I'll accept it. Following that, the two chatted as they drank. It was quite a pleasant conversation until 5 minutes later, when Lin's son stood up and bade farewell. Interesting. This demon god Lin isn't as arrogant and ferocious as the rumors say. Miss Lu sat there with her clear eyes in a daze as she fell into deep thought. Just as Lin's son had guessed, she had long seen through Lin's son's identity. However, after some interaction, she realized that demon god Lin wasn't arrogant or ferocious at all. Instead, he was humble and low-key, making it difficult for her to see through him. Those orthodoxies in the West Hung world are really stupid. They actually can't accept such a peerless elite. They will definitely regret it in the future. If possible, I can form a good relationship with him. After a long while, Miss Lu played with the wine cup in her hand as her lips curled into an indescribable smile. This woman's means are really amazing. She's beautiful on the outside, but intelligent on the inside. She's also experienced in the ways of the world. Her wisdom is close to that of a demon. At the same time, Lin Sun sighed with emotion in his heart, with a trace of appreciation in his black eyes. Coming into contact with smart people would unconsciously make people fearful. Miss Cola was different. She'd restrained her edge since a long time ago, and she treated others like the spring breeze and rain that nourished them silently, causing others to be utterly unable to arouse a trace of dislike towards her. This was remarkable. It was true wisdom. Interesting. She came from a certain Saint Hermit grounds and seems to know many secrets that others are unaware of. Her identity is bound to not be simple. Lin Sun was also thinking. From his previous conversation with Miss Lu, Lin Sun already knew that the enemies who were after her were from an ancient country called Aolai. The Aolai nation was located near a vast sea in the Dongsheng world. It had existed since ancient times and was also known as the ancient nation of all eras. According to Miss Li's words, Aolai nation could already be considered a peak ancient power. It had a true sage overseeing it and had an extremely solid foundation. In the Aolai nation, all the cultivation forces were under the control of the Sacred Flame sect. The king, the imperial teacher, and even the great figures of the nation were all disciples of the Sacred Flame sect. It could be said that the entire Aolai nation was actually ruled by the Sacred Flame sect. Lin Sun was not interested in the Sacred Flame sect. What really surprised him was that Miss Lu came from a certain Saint Hermit grounds, but the Sacred Flame sect still dared to hunt her down. From this, it could be seen that the Sacred Flame sect's foundation was definitely not ordinary. As for why she was being hunted by the Sacred Flame sect, Miss Li's answer was very simple. The Sacred Flame sect is an unorthodox sect that harbors evil and brings disaster to the world. Everyone has the right to punish them. Lin Sun naturally did not believe this reason, but Miss Li's expression was very serious and solemn at that time, so Lin Sun did not pursue the matter. Lin Sun, I'm hungry. Xia Ji woke up, and her words woke Lin Sun up from his deep thoughts. At the same time, on the dangerous and unpredictable Boundary River, a treasured ship flowing with a dazzling golden luster was flying in the void. Although the Boundary River is dangerous, as long as we don't meet those damned remnant thoughts of the sage, we won't be too much of a threat. On the treasured ship, Shun Baixian spoke with a smile. He was very conceited. By the way, why did you enter the Boundary River this time? He turned his head to look at Loka, who was beside him. I'm looking for an opportunity. Loka held a bright red feather in his hand. The feather fluttered like a bloody rain, and there was a dark and bloody aura that made one's heart palpitate. It was extremely frightening. Shun Baixian recognized at a glance that this was the true life feather of a dark blood-black phoenix. It was extremely mysterious and priceless, and it was a divine material for refining sage treasures. Moreover, this item contained the great Tao imprint of the dark blood black phoenix, and it was also immeasurably useful for cultivation. Shun Baixian seemed to realize something and asked in surprise, "You're looking for a dark blood black phoenix?" "No, it's a remnant soul of a dark blood black phoenix." Luo Jia did not hide anything. According to my master's analysis, a dark blood black phoenix, who had reached the saint stage, died in the boundary river that leads to the Dongsheng domain in ancient times. However, its soul did not dissipate. Instead, it was sealed in a mysterious relic in the boundary river. If I can obtain it, I can obtain the Dark Phoenix Void Destruction Technique. Shun Baishuan's eyes surged with divine light, and he seemed to be moved. He said, "The Dark Phoenix Void Destruction Technique is one of the 9 scriptures of the immortal phoenix. Did you really awaken the power of your bloodline during the Tao Discussion Lantern Festival and grasp the profound meaning of the great Tao of the immortal phoenix?" Loka nodded with a calm expression. There was nothing to hide. Shun Baixian immediately lost his composure. The 9 scriptures of the immortal phoenix was composed of 9 supreme scriptures of the Phoenix Tao. In the ancient era, it could be called a world-suppressing inheritance, and it was close to being a legend. Each of them could be called a supreme, secret inheritance, and the complete 9 scriptures of the immortal Phoenix was even more incredible. It contained unimaginable mysteries. However, the 9 scriptures of the immortal Phoenix had never truly appeared in its entirety since the ancient era. It was divided into 9 parts that were scattered all over the world, and no one had fused them until now. The most abnormal thing was that this Tao scripture was extremely obscure and supreme. Only the descendants of the Phoenix clan that controlled the power of the great Tao of the immortal Phoenix could comprehend and control it. In other words, even if this Tao scripture was obtained by other cultivators, they could only observe it and not cultivate it. And it was obvious that Loka now had the qualifications to comprehend and learn the 9 scriptures of the immortal Phoenix. This was what shocked Shun Baixian. At that time, Ji Xingyao comprehended the great Tao of supreme mystery, one of the 4 ultimate killing Taos. Yu Lingkong comprehended the great Tao of green lotus, also known as the true, profound Tao of heaven and earth. Loka's voice was gentle and clear, like a clear spring flowing in a valley. He said slowly, "And I comprehended the great Tao of the immortal Phoenix." Shun Baishuan's eyes flickered, and he sighed with a trace of regret. "These are all great Taos on the Supreme Tao list. Unfortunately, I missed such an excellent opportunity. In the ancient era, the saints of the world evaluated the great Taos of the world. They believed that out of the 3,000 great Taos, only 99 great Taos could be called Supreme Tao. Later on, the cultivators of the world listed these 99 great Taos in the Supreme Tao list according to their profundities and power. This was the reason for Shun Baishuan's regret. With his status and identity, only the Supreme Tao could tempt him. By the way, what great Tao profundity did Demon God Lin comprehend? Shun Baixian suddenly asked. It's suspected to be the Vortex Great Tao, but it's clearly different. It's very mysterious. Loka frowned. She still felt puzzled and could not get an exact answer. Shun Baixian was taken aback. How could this be? No one else could tell? A strange look flashed across Luo Jia's eyes. That's right. No one saw it, because the stone tablet he was comprehending was destroyed without a sound and disappeared. That's really strange. Shun Baixian was stunned. So, I advise you not to have any ideas about him. There are many mysteries about him that even I can't see through. Loka took the opportunity to remind him. Unexpectedly, these words stirred up Shun Baishuan's fighting spirit. He said excitedly, the more such an opponent is, the more interesting it is. If he's too weak, I can't be bothered. Loka was speechless. At that moment, the sound of something tearing through the air sounded from afar. Luo Jia and Shun Baixian were immediately alarmed, and they looked at each other. Swoosh! The next moment, the two of them steered the treasured ship far away, concealing their tracks. Not long after, A narrow ship that was 300 meters long and seemed to be made of blood-red crystals whistled over from the sky. The surface of the ship was covered in dense spirit patterns, which turned into many sacred flame totems. It had a kind of intimidating power. On the ship, 6 half-step monarchs stood side by side. All of them were dressed in black robes and had a murderous and terrifying aura. Reporting to the priests, "We've locked onto that woman's aura. If nothing goes wrong, we'll be able to catch up to her in half an hour." A black-robed man prostrated on the ground and said in a low voice, "Prepare for battle. This time, we can't let her escape no matter what." The leader, an old man with white hair and a youthful face, said indifferently, "Yes." The black-robed man got up and hurried away. Very soon, the blood-colored ship that exuded a murderous aura shuttled through the void at an incredible speed. The priests and disciples of the Sacred Flame sect? What are they doing here? Shun Baixian appeared on the treasured ship with a surprised expression. The Sacred Flame sect was an ancient sect that was entrenched in the Ao Lai nation. Its history could be traced back to ancient times, and it had a long history. However, this sect didn't seem to have a good reputation. This was all Shun Baixian knew. Although the Ao Lai nation was also in the East Victory boundary, it had always occupied the depths of the vast ocean and was almost isolated from the rest of the world. There was very little news about this ancient nation of all ages in the outside world. Let's go and take a look. This Sacred Flame sect is very mysterious. For them to appear here, they must be planning to do something unspeakable. Without waiting for Loka's agreement, Shun Baixian had already steered the treasured ship and set off. Chapter 956. The blood-colored ship was about 300 meters long and was floating in the distance. On the ship, a group of cultivators with murderous auras looked over with indifferent expressions. They were led by 6 half-step King Realm cultivators, all of whom were dressed in black robes. Although they were standing there silently, the power they exuded was overwhelming and extremely terrifying. Ko Xing, green-faced assassin, and Qi Lian looked solemn and uneasy. Perhaps they could rely on their rich experience to deal with the dangers of the Boundary River, but against such a powerful group, they were helpless and felt despair. There was no other reason than the disparity in strength. This group of people had just rushed over and blocked their path. Needless to say, they were definitely here for Miss Lu. Trouble is coming. On the other hand, Miss Lu seemed very calm and sighed helplessly. She looked at Lin Sun. "Look, these are the disciples of the Sacred Flame sect of Ao Lai Nation. The 6 old guys in the lead are the priests of the Sacred Flame sect. All of them are ruthless and have taken at least tens of thousands of lives. It's not an exaggeration to call them the executioners of the Sacred Flame sect." Lin Sun grunted in response as he sized them up. 6 half-step King Realm cultivators and 18 reincarnation developing realm cultivators. This kind of force was indeed elite and huge, enough to make any expert below the King Realm feel despair. But that didn't include Lin Sun. He just felt a little strange. The disciples of the Sacred Flame sect, whether they were at the half-step King Realm or the reincarnation developing realm, all had a trace of gloomy and unique aura that made people feel very uncomfortable. "Miss Lu, we meet again. As long as you hand over the Sacred Flame Source Stone, we might show you mercy and give you a quick death." On the blood-colored ship in the distance, the old man with white hair and a youthful face said indifferently, "You'd better not have any wishful thinking. This time, no one can save you." Sacred Flame Source Stone. Lin Sun was startled. Then, Miss Li's voice rang in his ears. "This is a sacred relic of the Sacred Fire sect. It contains the power of vow that they have absorbed from countless creatures in Ao Lai Nation over the years. It's crucial for them to refine some demonic weapons." At the same time, Miss Lu smiled faintly and looked at the blood-colored warship in the distance. She said, "The existence of the sacred Fire Tao Source Rock is a crime that harms the heavens and brings calamity to the masses. It is the source of evil and cannot be tolerated by the world. I'm enforcing justice on behalf of the heavens, yet you want to kill me. This is unreasonable. Don't try to argue." A half-step king realm expert shouted loudly with a voice that was like a thunderclap that resounded through the heavens and the earth. Cut the crap. This woman refuses to come to her senses, so just kill her. As for her companions, they're helping the wicked commit evil, so they deserve death as well. The other half-step king realm experts spoke coldly as well. Very well. The old man in the lead nodded, his expression cold. From a beginning to the end, they did not care about anyone other than Miss Lu. Obviously, whether it was Lin Sun or Ko Xing, they were all ignored and didn't take them seriously. This arrogant and cold attitude infuriated Ko Xing and the others. But at the same time, they felt extremely depressed. Even they had to admit that the other party had the ability to disregard them. Lin Sun could not help but frown. This sacred flame sect was really arrogant. They intended to kill all of them with just a few words. Obviously, they had done too many things that disregarded human lives in the past. Boom. However, no matter what Lin Sun thought, the other party had already made a move. A black-robed, middle-aged man with the cultivation of half-step king realm stepped on the void and arrived. With a flip of his hand, a large black handprint pressed down, covering the sky and the earth. The sound of Tao rumbled and enveloped the treasured warship where Lin Sun and the others were. He seemed very indifferent and cold, high and mighty, like the master of life and death. Ko Xing and the others were on the verge of collapse. Even if they wanted to dodge and struggle, they could not summon any thoughts of resisting when faced with the suppression of a half-step king realm expert. Too strong. They were not on the same level at all. They were like tiny ants facing the merciless attack of a dragon in the sky. Even Miss Lu could not help but feel a little nervous at this moment. She did not expect that the Sacred Flame sect would send out 6 half-step king realm experts this time. Even though she was very optimistic about Lin Sun, her confidence was inevitably shaken at this moment. An imperceptible worry appeared between her brows. Lin Sun was still thinking whether he should adopt a way to ease the situation and resolve this sudden obstruction. After all, he had no enmity with the Sacred Flame sect. He just wanted to help Miss Lu, so it was not worthwhile to do something too out of line. But now he changed his mind. From the very beginning, the other party had directly ignored them, treating them as if they did not exist. Now, they actually wanted to kill all of them directly. How could Lin Sun tolerate that kind of indifferent, cold, and domineering attitude? It was conceivable how overbearing the other party was to make such a ruthless move when there was no enmity between them. In the blink of an eye, when the other party attacked, Lin Sun had already attacked. Using ice drake steps, his figure soared into the sky and punched out. The black-robed, middle-aged man seemed a little surprised. At this time, there was actually a young man in the Tao Insight realm who dared to stand out. He was really reckless. Immediately, he understood, and a touch of disdain appeared on his indifferent face. He sensed that Lin Sun's aura had instantly reached the middle reincarnation developing realm from the Tao Insight realm. It turned out to be a guy who deliberately hid his strength. But was this the reason why he dared to stand out and fight against him? That's really not good enough. The black-robed, middle-aged man looked indifferent, as if he saw a moth flying into the fire. There was no pity, no sympathy, and even no interest in him. As a half-step king realm expert, he already had the power to look down on the cultivators of the 5 realms. Over the years, he had killed countless reincarnation developing realm practitioners, so why would he care about such resistance? On the blood-colored warship in the distance, a group of Sacred Flame sect priests and disciples also looked indifferent. They had seen a lot of struggle and resistance. Perhaps this was the only thing that every strong person could do before they died, so they were already used to it. Ko Xing and the others were dumbfounded. They did not expect that Lin Xia would be so unyielding at this time. He would rather die than wait for death. Boom! The black-robed middle-aged man's palm had already slapped down, covering the sky and the earth, without any change. Boom! At the same time, Lin Sun also punched out, simple, plain, and without a trace of fire and fire. Then, a scene that no one had expected happened. Lin Sun's fist force easily smashed the sky-covering black palm print, as if it was crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. Boom! The sound of the explosion resounded, and the palm force turned into a sky full of light rain and collapsed with earth-shattering momentum. No! On the blood-colored warship in the distance, everyone's pupils shrank. This! Ko Xing and the others were dumbfounded. That was a blow from a half-step king realm expert, but it was so easily resolved? No wonder he is the demon god Lin who stirred up the Shiheng world. Miss Lu praised in her heart. The black-robed, middle-aged man's pupils suddenly shrank, and he suddenly realized the power of this punch, which was completely different from what he had expected. However, he was, after all, a half-step king realm expert. He was calm and cool in the face of danger. This little accident could not make him panic at all. Bang! The fist force emanated a dazzling glow, and it already crushed through space as it whistled towards the black-robed, middle-aged man. It's not bad that you were able to deal with a strike of mine. I can give you a dignified death, said the middle-aged man in an icy cold voice. His expression was still supreme, arrogant, and proud, as if he was giving alms. As he spoke, he took the initiative to move forward and press his palm forward. Space suddenly collapsed while the heavens and the earth wailed, and a strand of terrifying force surged out from his palm. It was like a dragon leaving its lair, and it threw the world into disorder. This was the might of a half-step king realm expert. Even though he wasn't a true king, he stood above the 5 great realms and possessed the might to look down upon others. But at the instant his palm force collided with Lin Sun's fist, the middle-aged man realized that he was wrong. His originally indifferent and arrogant expression had vanished, and it was replaced by a wisp of shock. He seemed to be filled with disbelief, and the space between his brows even carried a trace of imperceptible panic. But he didn't have the time to do anything. Rumble! The terrifying force of the fist was like a landslide and a tsunami, and it carried an unparalleled and all-powerful force as it instantly crushed his palm force. After that, under the middle-aged man's gaze of disbelief, this fist smashed fiercely onto his body. Bang! At this critical moment, he'd already utilized the entire strength of a half-step king realm expert to defend himself. Yet he still felt pain throughout his entire body while the bones in his chest suddenly broke and emanated cracking sounds. After that, his entire body was blasted flying like a kite that had its string cut. During this entire process, blood sprayed from his mouth and nose, his face warped, his chest collapsed, and his back bent like a cooked prawn. In the end, the middle-aged man couldn't help but let out a shrill cry that resounded through the sky. All of this took a long time to describe, yet it actually occurred in an instant. From the beginning until the end, Lin Sun merely punched out once. He first shattered a palm print that blotted out the sky, and then he smashed another palm force with irresistible force before finally smashing onto the middle-aged man. All along the way, it was unstoppable. The whole place was silent. Whether it was the people of the Sacred Fire sect on the Scarlet Warship or Ko Xing, they all felt as if they'd been struck by lightning at this moment. Their pupils dilated, and they couldn't believe their eyes. It was too fast. It was too unexpected. A young man who was regarded as a moth flying into the fire had blown away a half-step king realm expert with a single punch, showing an invincible momentum. Only Miss Lin knew that the middle-aged man in the black robe was completely courting his own death. He regarded Lin Sun as an insignificant ant trying to shake a tree. But he didn't know that Lin Sun was not an ant, but the fierce demon god Lin. If the middle-aged man in the black robe had taken it seriously, he might not have been defeated so quickly. However, he was so conceited and careless. Wasn't he courting his own death? Of course, the middle-aged man's carelessness was the main reason. But at the same time, it was also because Lin Sun's combat power was so powerful that it was far beyond his peers. As early as when he entered the ancient Desolation Realm, he was able to defeat Lin Taijin of the Divine Fox Clan of Green Mountains, who was also a half-step King Realm expert. Chapter 9:57. In any case, Miss Lu was secretly relieved by Lin's performance, but she couldn't help feeling surprised. Even if the black-robed middle-aged man was careless, not every practitioner in the reincarnation development realm could do this. The black-robed middle-aged man was screaming in anger. His chest had collapsed, and he was seriously injured. He still couldn't believe it. On the Scarlet Ship, the people of the Sacred Fire sect were restless and also couldn't believe it. Boom! Lin Sun didn't care about this. He didn't say a word. From beginning to end, the black-robed middle-aged man was arrogant and regarded him as a fish on the chopping block. At this moment, he also didn't want to say a word. When he defeated the black-robed middle-aged man, he rushed out like lightning. Lin Sun had killed people of the Half-Step King realm before. Bastard, you're courting death. Seeing Lin Sun rushing towards him, the black-robed middle-aged man roared. His eyes were about to crack, and his face was cold and terrible. A horrible breath spread from him like a tide. This was the power of the Half-Step King realm. At this moment, he no longer underestimated Lin Sun. He wanted to kill Lin Sun to wash away his shame. He controlled the black fire and released a powerful breath that could burn the sky and destroy the earth. He rushed towards Lin Sun with amazing power. Divine flame burning the sky. The black-robed middle-aged man roared and pressed his palms and fingers. Black flames emerged all over the sky. They were incomparably blazing and drowned the void. Boom! Lin Sun's black eyes flashed like lightning. He didn't retreat at all. His figure rose like an ice dragon and displayed the profound meaning of the 9 strikes for shaking heaven. His fist was bright like the sun, with unparalleled spirit. In a flash, the black-robed middle-aged man coughed up blood again. His attack was crushed. Instead of hurting Lin Sun, he was blown away again. Puff! He screamed and coughed up blood, his body twitching. All the people present gasped. This was a Half-Step King realm. But at this moment, they were in a state of complete defeat, and they couldn't even defend themselves. Who are you? The black-robed middle-aged man was shocked and completely realized the horror of his opponent. Even if he wasn't careless, he still felt that he couldn't fight back. This was undoubtedly incredible. Lin Sun ignored him. He was in no mood to pay attention to the black-robed middle-aged man when he was high and mighty and ignored everything. Kill! He attacked once more. His black hair fluttered while his handsome figure was bathed in dazzling, clear divine radiance, and he emanated an imposing aura of supremacy and supremacy. Everyone was stunned. Ko Xing and the others almost thought that they were hallucinating. They couldn't believe it. At this moment, if anyone dared to say that this young master Lin Xia was a spirit celestial master, they would definitely spray him to death with their spit. Oomph. I never expected that I would actually encounter a young genius that has stepped foot onto the extreme path towards the Tao. How unexpected. However, do you really think no one can stop you? An indifferent voice suddenly resounded when the black-robed middle-aged man was about to suffer. Along with the voice, numerous Half-Step King realm figures rushed out from the blood-red ship to kill Lin Sun. Naturally, they could not tolerate their companion being killed right under their noses. At the same time, the group of Sacred Flame sect disciples also attacked, charging towards Miss Lu and the rest on the treasured ship. At this moment, the advantage of numbers was displayed to the fullest. The expressions of Ko Xing and the others changed, and the glimmer of hope that had been born in their hearts was extinguished. Miss Li's heart also sank. They only had Lin Sun on their side. He might be able to fight one side alone, but it was difficult for 2 fists to fight against 4 hands. Under such circumstances, could they still count on Lin Sun to turn the tide alone? It was very difficult. It could even be said that there was no hope. The reason was that the other party had an absolute advantage in terms of numbers. At this critical juncture, Miss Lu gritted her teeth, and a ruthless look flashed in her clear eyes, as if she had made some kind of decision. However, before she could act, a dazzling snow-white saber radiance suddenly appeared in front of her. A broken saber swept across the sky, as if it had pierced through time and space, leaving behind a series of shadows that were invisible to the naked eye. Poof, poof, poof. Some of the Sacred Flame sect disciples who had rushed over first were still flying in the void when their bodies were cut in half by the saber radiance. Scarlet blood was like fireworks, exploding above the dangerous and turbulent Boundary River. It was glaring and horrifying. Those sacred flame sect disciples were all great reincarnation developing realm cultivators. They belonged to the elite force, but now they were like paper. In an instant, a saber had broken through the life and death situation. Ko Xing and the others dared to swear that they were destined to never forget this scene for the rest of their lives. A saber swept across the sky and cut down the enemies like grass. Even Miss Lu could not help but feel shocked. Originally, she was ready to use the forbidden skill in her eyes and risk her life at the expense of her cultivation. But now it was obviously useless. There was a brief silence, and then angry roars sounded one after another. Bastard! Kill! Kill this evil creature! Damn it! The priests and disciples of the sacred flame sect were stimulated to the point of madness, unable to accept all this. They could not imagine that the young man could still control the broken saber to save others when he was besieged by a group of Half-Step King realm cultivators. Slash! A Half-Step King realm cultivator took out a black sword and slashed down. The sword intent was like fire, and the sword radiance was thousands of feet long, cutting through the void. Dying! At the same time, several other Half-Step King realm cultivators also attacked from different directions. Buzz! A demonic black giant scissors swept across the sky, and the sharp blades crisscrossed as if they could cut off the yin and yang of the universe. Bang! An enormous hammer that was coiled in lightning descended, and it emanated a myriad of dazzling and resplendent bolts of lightning. Swish! A multicolored whip flashed through the sky, and it emanated circles of multicolored whip images that enveloped down. In an instant, various treasures and secret techniques were like a storm that crisscrossed and intersected in this area, and they revealed boundless phenomena that caused the scene to be extremely terrifying. The surface of the river in an area of 500 kilometers was collapsing and transforming into chaotic flows. Moreover, numerous horrifying rifts appeared in the sky. The heavens and the earth were dim while rumbling like thunder, and it was an expanse of signs of destruction. Such a battle was truly too shocking. Numerous Half-Step King realm cultivators had attacked, and if it was an immortal world, it was sufficient to easily destroy a city and sink an expanse of mountains and rivers. Under such a joint attack, any other cultivator would probably feel despair, be overwhelmed with terror, and be unable to arouse the thought to resist. However, Lin Sun was an exception. The most unexpected thing was that he was still attacking the black-robed, middle-aged man at this moment. But unlike before, he'd utilized his full strength. Bang! The snow-white chi soared into the sky. The simple and heavy chi seal suppressed the void. The Baxiao prohibition turned into obscure restriction fluctuations. The golden sound waves of Pushou's roar spread out, and the chi seal collided with each other. In an instant, Lin Sun exerted the profound meaning of the 9 changes of Calamity Dragon at the same time. As far as the eye could see, one after another, the phantoms of divine beasts appeared around him, shining brightly as if they were alive. It was a shocking scene. This was not the end. In Lin Sun's body, the profound meaning of the Yazi's wrath was running, making his blood and chi boil and his chi furious in his hands. The profound meaning of the 9 strikes for shaking heaven was running in full force, showing the terrible power that could collapse the world and all things. In his sea of consciousness, the spirit of the primordial spirit had a brilliant divine flower above its head. With a solemn appearance, it perfectly manipulated the broken blade and exerted the profound meaning of the 6 strikes of Tianyuan. In front of the treasure ship, it shielded Ko Xing and the others from the wind and rain and killed the enemies. At this moment, Lin Sun seemed to have 3 heads and 6 arms. He exerted all his power at the same time, and his whole body was like a demon that could strike the 9 heavens and 10 earths. Rumble, in an instant, there was an earth-shattering collision in the field. It was as if thunder was surging in the 9th heaven. The blazing light of Tao and divine brilliance swept across, and everything seemed turbulent and chaotic. Even Miss Lu and the others could no longer see the battle in the field clearly. It was too bright and dazzling, making people shudder with fear and unable to look at it closely. This made them worry whether Lin Sun could hold on under such a siege. Swish! The snow-white, broken blade flickered, tearing the void and slashing down incomparably sharp saber radiance. The disciples of the Sacred Fire sect didn't dare to approach. Even the Half-Step King realm experts couldn't break through the defense of the broken blade and were forced to retreat. Seeing this scene, Miss Lu and the others felt a little relieved, but then they fell into shock. How could Lin Sun block the attack of a group of Sacred Fire sect alone? If this was spread out, it would definitely cause a great sensation. Compared to this, the experts of the Sacred Fire sect were even more shocked and angry. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they wouldn't have believed that there was such a heaven-defying young man in this world. He alone withstood the siege of a group of Half-Step King realm experts, and still had the strength to protect his companions. Who could believe it? Kill! The Half-Step King realm experts were furious. Their faces were livid, and they were completely determined to kill. If they let Lin Sun live, it would definitely be a great shame for them. They were destined to become a laughing stock and be sneered at by the world. At this moment, Lin Sun felt an unprecedented pressure. Towards the end of the battle, he had to use the fighting saint technique to barely block the terrifying attacks from all directions. But at the same time, Lin Sun also felt a rare and incomparably carefree feeling. He experienced the soul-stirring feeling that could only be brought about by a life-and-death battle. Battles could make people transform in the shortest time possible, and the source of transformation came from the 4 words soul-stirring. This was a feeling that could only be experienced in a life-and-death battle. In an ordinary spar and competition, knowing that life and death would not be decided, one naturally couldn't have this kind of feeling. Only under this kind of pressure of life and death could one's potential be completely stimulated and exert power far beyond the ordinary. Of course, this was very dangerous. A little carelessness could lead to death. At this moment, Lin Sun's blood was burning and his fighting spirit was boiling, but his state of mind was clear and pure. The mystery of fighting flowed in his heart, which stimulated his potential in the battle and made him braver and braver. Until later, his spiritual vein began to heat up as if it had awakened from silence. Unconsciously, he had already operated the profound meaning of Devouring Star Way. Chapter 958. Clang! Lin Sun's fist shone and collided head-on with a thunderbolt hammer. Lightning splashed, and a deafening roar resounded. At the same time, colorful whips shrouded down and broke the void with amazing momentum, trying to imprison Lin Sun. Lin Sun didn't retreat, but advanced instead. He let out a Dao tune, causing golden ripples to spread out and shatter the whip shadows that covered the sky inch by inch, causing them to transform into a rain of light that dispersed into a chaotic flow. He pinched the Swanee seal with his left hand and deduced the meaning of 9 strikes for shaking heaven with his right hand, fighting against the Half-Step King realm experts who were rushing from both sides. Rumble! The void was collapsing as if it had been blown up. Lin Sun used different magical Taoism alone to fight against the siege of 4 Half-Step King realm experts at the same time. He was extremely powerful and disdainful. The most terrifying thing was that during this process, his spirit of spirit was still controlling the broken blade to stop the opponents on another battlefield. There were also 2 Half-Step King realm experts among those opponents. Ko Xing and the others were dumbstruck, and they were shocked speechless. Originally, they'd wanted to help, yet they quickly noticed that they didn't have the chance to interfere at all. Only Miss Lu took out a string of purple bells and deduced the infinite mystery of music. The bells tinkled in the battlefield and helped Lin Sun's broken blade to stop the enemies. Even so, Miss Lu sighed with emotion. She could infer that Lin Sun was extremely powerful and did not belong to any peerless figure in the world. But she didn't expect him to be so strong. Among the younger generation in the entire ancient desolation realm, there were only a few people who could do this. After all, They were the 6 priests of the Sacred Fire sect, all of whom were half-step king realm experts. In addition, there were also a group of reincarnation developing realm cultivators attacking together. But Lin Sun, with the cultivation of reincarnation developing realm, turned the tide and fought against the group of enemies. Kill. The people of the Sacred Fire sect were really angry and their eyes were red. They had come here with so many people, but they were stopped by a young man, which was too shameful. At the same time, Lin Sun's combat strength also shocked them. They realized that he was a genius who could not be looked at normally. What was most intolerable was that they hadn't gained any advantage from the beginning of the battle. They couldn't even suppress their opponent. "Young man, who exactly are you?" The elder in the lead shouted loudly. His heart was pounding, and he suspected that the other party was an exceptional inheritor from some terrifying inheritance. The other half-step king realms had livid expressions as well, and they were surprised and bewildered in their hearts. They suspected that if they didn't join forces, they might not be able to go against this youth. As far as they were concerned, only those peerless and monstrous geniuses that came from ancient sects in the world possessed such heaven-defying combat strength that was capable of surmounting a realm to do battle, and they were extremely abnormal. Lin Sun didn't say a word. His combat power circulated around him, and his figure was like a devil attacking. He had the spirit to swallow the world, and if not me, who else could it be? The battle was very dangerous, and the pressure was not ordinary. But it was in such a precarious situation that Lin Sun's potential was completely stimulated. With the help of the battle, Lin Sun's martial arts were honed. He had a kind of extreme release and unprecedented explosive momentum. During the Dao Lantern discussion, he'd already tempered his strength to the absolute peak, and he was capable of suppressing all experts and forcefully crushing Yulinkong. Even if it was a collision between absolute paths towards the Dao, he still possessed the might to crush all enemies. But this did not mean that it was perfect. His cultivation hadn't reached the consummation of the reincarnation developing realm. Similarly, no matter it was the supreme Taoist method of Star River by fire or the 6 decapitations of heaven, he hadn't completely grasped its essence. In addition, his control of the Great Way of Fire was only at the level of Tao aura, and there was still a step away from the realm of Tao intent. These were not flaws, but potential. Only by thoroughly excavating them and attaining the consummation could it be called the true perfection. Perhaps in the eyes of others, he had already stood at a height that was enough to make anyone marvel in the younger generation. But for Lin Sun, it was far from enough. At least, compared with his enemy, Yun Qingbai, it was far from enough. There is no realm in martial arts. In the battle, Lin Sun came to a realization. Cultivation was limited by realms, but there was no realm in martial arts. For example, at this moment, his cultivation stagnated at the middle level of reincarnation developing realm, and he had already set foot on the absolute path towards Tao. But his control and exertion of martial arts could excavate new potential every time. This potential came from the Tao and method he cultivated. Comprehending the profound meaning of the Great Way could make the power of martial arts exert greater strength. Similarly, practicing secret fighting methods could also make the power of martial arts be improved to a whole new level. In short, cultivation was the origin of power, which determined the strength of martial arts. And the secret methods he cultivated and the profound meaning of the Great Way he comprehended could make the power of martial arts exert greater power. For example, Lin Sun's cultivation might still be at the middle level of reincarnation developing realm, but whether it was Star River of Fire or 6 cuts of Tian Yuan, as long as the profound meaning was completely grasped, it was destined to make a significant improvement in his combat power. Similarly, the further comprehension and control of the Great Way of Fire and the Devouring Star Way would also make his combat power rise. This was the connection between the Great Way, secret methods, and martial arts. Of course, one's own cultivation was still the foundation that determined the power of martial arts. Comprehending the profound meaning of "there is no realm in martial arts" was just a means to make the combat power more powerful on the basis of cultivation. Lin Sun, who was tempering himself in the battle, suddenly felt a trace of extreme danger in his heart, which made him suddenly sober up. Whoosh! Almost at the same time, the old man leading the sacred fire sect suddenly took out a rare treasure flowing with 5-colored divine flames. This was a divine fire shield, which emitted 5-colored divine flames. It was dazzling and quickly expanded in the void, enveloping the entire area. In an instant, the flames poured down from the sky, and infinite Tao patterns appeared and tumbled, possessing the power to burn the sky and destroy the earth. It was terrifying and magical to the extreme. 5-color divine fire shield. On the treasure ship in the distance, Miss Li's pupils shrank, and a trace of surprise appeared between her brows. Her heart tightened. This treasure was too famous. It had shone brilliantly in ancient times, and its ferocious power shocked the world. No one knew how many exceedingly powerful experts had been killed by it. Rumor had it that the 5-color divine fire shield was refined from the 5 most famous divine flames in the world: the emu green flame, the gold white flame, the clean water black flame, the extreme earth yellow flame, and the precious sun red flame. It derived the essence of the 5 elements and was said to be able to smelt the universe and burn the galaxy. There were too many legends about this treasure. It was said that it was personally refined by a king sage in ancient times. When the refinement was successful, the sun and the moon lost their light. The mountains and rivers within 100,000 miles turned into ashes, and all living beings perished. It was as if the end of the world had arrived, and the phenomenon was shocking. In the past, when this treasure appeared, all the sages had to avoid it, and it had killed an unknown number of powerful ancient figures. In short, this was a psychic saint treasure that had long been famous in ancient times, and it had once displayed its ferocious power in that era. But immediately, Miss Lu realized that the treasure taken out by the Sacred Fire sect should only be an imitation. Although its power was terrifying, it didn't have the kind of supreme power that could suppress a world and make the heavens tremble. But even so, this imitation 5-color divine fire shield was amazing enough. It was like a chaotic furnace that could incinerate everything. It was hard to imagine how terrifying it would be when the real 5-color divine fire shield was born. Although Lin Sun didn't recognize this treasure, he sensed the fatal danger at the first moment, and his hair stood on end. "You can die without regrets since you forced me to use this treasure," the old man said indifferently, and his voice was extremely cold. At this moment, he was extremely confident. The other half-step king realms all retreated, unwilling to be involved. They knew the horror of the 5-color divine fire shield, and even they would suffer if they were shrouded in it. Boom! The divine fire shield hung in the sky like a sun, pouring out 5 different kinds of divine flames, like magnificent heavenly fire pouring down. The scene was extremely beautiful and terrifying. Ridiculous! But Lin Sun was not afraid, and there was an undisguised disdain on his lips. It was ridiculous that 6 half-step king realms could only rely on treasures to suppress him. Lin Sun felt ashamed for them. Ridiculous! This was the first time Lin Sun had said this since the battle began. The undisguised mockery and disdain made the faces of the Sacred Fire sect's powerhouses darken and become ugly. A young man at the Reincarnation Development realm was not afraid when death was near, and instead mocked them. This made them feel embarrassed. Young man, even if you have really grown up, the Sacred Fire sect is not something you can offend. No matter how powerful you are still an ant before you become a king. Brother, don't talk nonsense. Use all your strength to refine it. The half-step king realms looked like they were staring at a dead man, and their faces were gloomy. If they didn't kill Lin Sun, they wouldn't be able to wash away the shame in their hearts. In fact, when they spoke, Lin Sun had already been shrouded in the area covered by the 5-color divine fire shield, and he was passively dodging the attacks of the 5-color divine fire. That made Miss Lu, Ko Xing, and the others feel their hearts in their throats. They were extremely nervous. At the same time, they had no time to be distracted because the enemy opposite them had also taken the opportunity to launch the most intense attack. If it wasn't for Duan soaring into the sky and blocking the attack with all his might, they would have probably suffered a calamity long ago. The situation at this moment was undoubtedly dangerous to the extreme, and it could be said that their lives were hanging by a thread. Die. The old man in the lead spoke calmly, and his eyes were filled with coldness. He activated the 5-color divine fire shield, and the 5-color divine fire fell like a waterfall. It was dazzling and resplendent, and it burned the void to the point of collapsing. Die? Let me see who will die first. At the same time, Lin Sun stretched out his hand and flipped it over. A white jade bottle that was only a few inches tall suddenly flashed out of thin air, and it emanated an obscure and strange brilliance. The Great Way Bottle, as early as the Tao Discussion Lantern Festival. This bottle had already been filled with the power of the king's 4 symbols formation. Originally, Lin Sun intended to use it when he killed Mu Jianting and the others, but because of Xia Zhi's sudden appearance, the bottle hadn't revealed its power. But now, Lin Sun couldn't care about anything else. The 5-color divine fire shield was too great a threat to him, and it was sufficient to kill him. He couldn't hold it back any longer. Wham! The Great Way bottle glowed, and the accumulated power of the king's formation spread out. Moreover, its power was twice as strong as before.